Lu Ji is a young man whose goal is to provide the best life for his little sister. After his father's death, he became the protector of the household. He works hard every day, keeping games as just a simple hobby. But what happens when a hobby becomes reality? Earth has merged with the game Yuan World, allowing players to use their characters' abilities in real life. While some are lucky, that wasn't the case for Ji, who had to watch helplessly as his younger sister was killed, only to be humiliated by her murderers afterward. Blinded by rage, he uses his final breath to fight back, even though he knows it's a battle he can never win. But since this is our protagonist's story, it can't end in just one chapter. Unexpectedly, he has traveled 3 years back in time, specifically to July 27th, 2030. This is the exact day Yuan World was released, and this time, his goal is to become a top-tier player to protect his sister. This is how it all begins, and he's playing for keeps now. And we're not talking about League of Legends, folks. On September 1st, Yuan World became reality. Overnight, those addicted to the game became the rulers of Earth. The struggle for power plunged humanity into chaos. Naturally, the only one who can predict the coming disaster is Ji. Without wasting a single minute, he prepares his gear for the launch of Yuan World, knowing he has 34 days to improve his skills before the world is submerged in virtual reality. Millions of players land in Yuan World, fascinated by the game's graphics. Unlike the rookies, our protagonist knows exactly what to do. He separates from the group to search for Ki, the strongest and most mysterious skill in the game that determines if you're a high-level player. He heads to the training area, as he first needs to master a soul that fits his character. The only way to know which one will activate Ki is to use it and master it 100% until one of them triggers the Ki activation. Using weapons also increases proficiency points. Outside the training area, a couple of kids are having fun testing the virtual world's features, mentioning how the RPG elements, extreme sports, and sensory stimulation are incredible, considering these are the highest levels of the game. Before continuing their chat, they enter the training area and see that our protagonist is the only one there. Both players pick up some weapons, but indifferently toss them to the ground, mocking Ji for trying to build proficiency. They then head off to farm, which they consider more important. Ji spent the day using every weapon. On the first day, he reached 100% proficiency with the katana and sword. By the second day, he reached 100% with the spear, axe, and shield, but he still couldn't unlock Ki. By the third day, doubt began to creep in as other players reached level 20, while he was still level 1. Despite considering a different path, he regained his composure, determined to keep trying to find the perfect weapon to become a top player, and Ki is essential to that process. The same characters from before show up again. Out of curiosity, they enter the training area and are surprised to see him still there. The boy thinks that if this guy likes fighting so much, he should go on an adventure, hit the arena, or go to the mirror secret zone. They conclude he might be trying to activate a hidden skill, though hitting the same dummy for 3 days without damaging it makes him look like a loner. With their level, those two could easily tear the dummy apart. They leave again, but the boy is now curious about weapon proficiency. However, his partner is set on farming and drags him away. By the 5th day, Lu mastered 18 weapons, earning the Weapon Expert title. With this, he can use any weapon and simulate its attributes. Despite the achievement, it's not what he was looking for. He mastered 18 basic weapons and none gave him Ki. Instead of losing motivation, he uses common sense and decides to try the ranged weapon section, hoping that maybe these are the weapons used by elite players. Since he never looked into it or talked to other players, he doesn't know exactly which weapons activate Ki. Seeing the armory with over 50 more ranged weapons, he calculates that mastering them will take the remaining days before the tragedy. Before giving up, the memory of his sister's death flashes through his mind, motivating him to keep going. The nosy girl passes by the area again, just in time to witness the moment the protagonist finally obtains Ki. With his new skill, he prepares to go farm and catch up to the other players. For the first time, he locks eyes with Xin, who is too embarrassed to speak to him. The protagonist looks for answers, but since it's none of his business, he leaves and decides to go to the shop for some bullets and a melee weapon for emergencies. Then we see a chat between the two kids that shows Zin's lack of morals, as she tells her partner she's the one increasing her weapon skills. Meanwhile, the protagonist has bought a low-level white-tier pistol, 3 boxes of normal bullets, and a short white-tier dagger. For basic gear, it was extremely expensive, but the cost won't matter much considering what's coming in a few days. After getting over the price, he wonders if his weapon expert skill allows him to use Ki with weapons other than his main one. At night, he goes to the Mirror Secret Zone, an arena where players can level up for a fee. They can also pay to fight a random character of their level. If the player wins, they get all the gold from the challenged character, along with experience and extra rewards based on difficulty. But if they lose, their fee is added to the gold pool. The more money in the pool, the higher the rating. The conditions to participate are: the opponent must be at least 5 levels higher than the challenger. The fee to challenge them is 10% of the reward. Since the protagonist is level 1, he thinks his opponent won't be much of a threat thanks to his Ki skill. This way, he can test his abilities without ending up like the loser who just left the arena, having lost all his levels and money. Another spectator sees Ji and comments on how bold it is for a level 1 to enter the arena without good gear and using a long-range weapon, which isn't very popular. Assuming he'll lose, they dismiss him. When choosing his game mode, the protagonist picks the character named The World Is Not King. He remembers his past, where he chose the easiest route to farm levels because he lacked time and was afraid to fight. Now, he'll focus on facing his fears in combat, considering this his first real fight. Before the countdown ends, he tries to control his body's natural fear. When the timer hits 0, the battle begins. In the final minutes, the opponent knocks the pistol out of his hand. He immediately shields himself with his dagger. Fear still grips him, but he remembers the miracle of having a second chance at life. In the heat of the fight, he activates the weapon expert skill, and with a single attack, he splits the mirror character in half. He confirms that the skill lets him use ki with weapons that aren't his main ones, though the damage is only 50% of what he could do with the pistol. Despite winning, the frustration of still trembling with fear keeps him from celebrating. It only motivates him to push further. In the lobby, the previous character and his partner are still there. It turns out they've been watching the players, hoping to bet on someone capable of winning in the arena, which hadn't happened until now. As, seeing the protagonist, they realize he managed to defeat the level 5 character despite his equipment and combat level. Because of this, they hurry to request a betting permit, check which mirror character to select, and place their bets. The protagonist only thinks about increasing the difficulty to overcome his fear or die. After choosing the character Lightning Strike, the spectators panic because this is one of the strongest and most unstoppable characters at level 10. Since the bet can't be cancelled, he has no choice but to move forward, but without announcing or promoting the bet, which wasn't necessary since the other players saw it and didn't hesitate for a second to bet on the level 10 character, reaching a total of 200,000 points. Before starting the fight, the best way for the protagonist to clear his nerves was by stabbing a dagger into his leg. I'll interpret this as a way to focus on the pain to forget his fear. When the challenge begins, he can barely dodge the attacks, and his hits don't deal much damage. But then he thinks that by being on the brink of death, he can push past his limits and achieve a result that no one imagined. After winning, a notification panel opens for him to choose his key growth path between a healing or a damage skill. Back with the two gamblers, we see them in trouble, surrounded by those who bet against the protagonist, demanding their money. The guys clearly give up, but they try to reach an agreement with the winnings and ask for patience, since it's not 100% certain that the final result will favor the level 10 character. The group's representative mockingly bets that he'll eat crap if he loses such a sure bet. 5 seconds later, he eats his words after seeing Lightning Strike's massive defeat, and someone reminds him that those weren't just words, he'll actually have to eat it. The protagonist, indifferent to the betting, logs off to go recover his energy, thinking about his new discovery. He thinks about the fact that the world of skills exists, then ponders his options. Choosing the damage kit would deal 25 points of damage to the opponent every second, but it would only total 250 attack. On the other hand, he could use the healing kit once the world turns into a video game, with the possibility of maybe healing diseases and injuries. Plus, with an ability like that, it would be much easier to join a team. Thinking about this, he eats and runs back to his room while his sister seriously considers finding him a girlfriend. In the arena, someone else is crying over their money. Though the player's joy from bragging about the victory doesn't last long, as the manager of the New Order clan, Chicken Crawl, participated in the bet, intimidating the poor player, he refuses the offer to keep the entire reward, and instead asks for his help with a mysterious plan. By then, it's time to select the skill. Of course, he decided on the healing kit. With this, along with his combat experience, he's earned the title of low-level warrior and a significant boost to all his attributes. With the skill upgrade plus 152,478 experience points, his character reaches level 20. So G selects the same character again. Meanwhile, in the player chat, Gansi posts a new bet, but this time it's not from the host, but from Chicken Crawl. Before leaving, he bets his entire previous winnings, making the bet much more tempting. His guts aren't just from confidence in the protagonist, but because he might not be responsible for the bet. Therefore, any complaints will go directly to the leader of the New Order clan. So for now, he prepares to fulfill his part of the deal, which is posting the bet in the arena. What I want to try is finding the right opportunity to take down Lightning Strike with a single shot. When the fight begins, the skill level becomes apparent, and now no player can stop him. Just before finishing the character, the image of the assassin from his past life appears on his opponent's body, which distracts him and makes him back away. Frightened and retreating, he tries to calm down to face not only Lightning Strike, but also his fear of dying and being a failure for the rest of his life. With just one headshot, he's the champion once again, earning 152,470 coins, increasing his strength level and moving ahead of most players. In the betting area, some celebrate the triumph of their new idol, others cry over their lost money, and Gansi's friend understands the trap behind Chicken Crawl's bet. The idea is to present him to the players as someone truly strong. Then, when he faces the new level 30 character, they'll bet against the protagonist and take the biggest profit. Well, setting aside the players profiting from the drama of Lightning Strike's new rival, when I said he has a level 30 rank, his reward is 432,396 points. Belonging to the New Order clan, this character is described as impossible to beat, unbeatable, and insurmountable, perfect for our protagonist who wants to push his limits. Upon accepting the challenge, the betting begins as well. Gun blindly continues to bet in favor of the protagonist. With a 100% boost in wisdom and his level increasing to 23, he feels confident he'll put up a good fight. But as the fight starts, he didn't see that deadly drop in HP coming. He thinks it was a good idea to choose the healing kit, because with it, he manages to survive this violent encounter. Despite having the stats of a level 46 player, Lightning lives up to his reputation with unstoppable force. But Yi realizes that if this is all the strength he has, he can win by using something extra. Before continuing the fight, he learns the Blessing skill, which can increase an item's attributes and remove a random debuff from it for 1 minute. With the skill active, his title evolved to mid-level warrior, and with the help of the Blessing, his attributes are maxed out for a minute. Outside, everyone is going crazy, dividing the room between those excited by the Rising Star skills and those who still have faith in the mirror character. Gunshots keep ringing out in the room. Lightning continues on, unmoved by the attacks, until one shot managed to pierce the center of his chest. And then, 6 more followed. Unfortunately, what seemed like a sure victory reveals the secret behind the mirror character's winning streak. In G's past life, it was said that Lightning was unbeatable, and it's not just because of his attributes, he also has great equipment and his passive skill blocks HP. To win against that gear, he needs better attributes. Plus, he has the rule in his favor, where players must be 5 levels lower than the character they're fighting. Obviously, this won't stop Yi from his goal of overcoming his fears and leaving behind the cowardly loser of his past life. But he'll have to hurry, as he only has 25 seconds of the Blessing left to prove to himself that he's become stronger, more skilled, and above all, to become the best player. With a shot to the forehead, he makes his words a reality, achieving an unprecedented victory, but also making new enemies. Unaware of the player they've just provoked, Ji invites his sister to dinner using his reward money. Worried about his finances, she turns down the invitation, but the protagonist keeps insisting. After all, what good is money with only 25 days left until the fusion? Another day passes, and Ji tries to get a gaming pod for his sister, but demand is so high that his order won't be delivered for 2 months. That's obviously a waste of time, so with no other choice, he'll just have to work twice as hard to get stronger. Meanwhile, in a completely different scene away from the protagonist's worries, June is still on a mission to find her brother a girlfriend, and her first choice is her best friend Chu. But Chu has bigger things to worry about than a boyfriend, as her family is forcing her to play Yuan World. And speaking of Yuan World, someone inside the game doesn't know how to accept defeat. He vents his frustration in what his members say is a routine occurrence whenever he loses. After finishing using a girl as a punching bag, he gets a call from a mysterious person who questions Chicken's search methods. Yi returns to the game, and since there are no more opponents in the area, he heads toward the dungeon. He considers upgrading his gear first, but the shop's prices remind him that he's broke. Even though he leveled up quickly in the mirror arena, since he hasn't been farming in dungeons, he missed out on getting blue-tier gear. Regardless, there's nothing else to do. His goal in the dungeon is to earn some real money, so he goes to the dungeon lobby, a place to find teammates to explore with, since entering as a group is mandatory. Now here's how the dungeon works. The larger the group, the higher the difficulty, but the better the rewards. The downside is that once you enter, the exit cannot be opened unless you clear the entire dungeon or die. Dying in the dungeon results in a level reset as punishment, so people are usually very cautious when choosing a group. This works against our protagonist. Despite his skills and strength, no group wants him because he looks like a girl's newbie. Just as he's about to give up, Chicken appears and invites him to join. His group is heading to a level 35 dungeon with a 10-person limit, and wouldn't you know it, they just happen to need one more person. The protagonist stares at him for a moment, feeling like he knows him from somewhere. Before he can react, Chicken pressures him, saying he'll find someone else if he doesn't accept. So, G agrees to team up. There are 2 ways to reach the dungeon known as the Chaos Area. The first is on foot, and the second is to be rich, since you can pay to use the teleportation gates at the entrance of Musu City. The only benefit for G in this situation was the group's wealth. But despite what he thinks, these players are as bloodthirsty as they are rich, which he'll soon find out. Inside the dungeon, they realize it's a defensive mission because of the massive crystal in the center. Chicken orders everyone to surround and protect it from monsters. If its HP drops to 0 and it breaks, the mission fails. Right away, a swarm of beasts appears. One of the players tells G that since he's a newbie, he should stay near the crystal and try not to get killed. He simply follows orders, watching as the group slaughters the creatures in seconds. He's surprised by their teamwork, but then comes the moment we've been waiting for, the start of their plan to sabotage the protagonist. They intentionally let one of the beasts get close to G, and smiling as he watches the supposedly escaped creature. The protagonist assumes it was just a rookie mistake and kills the beast with a single slash. They successfully finish the fight, but that's not all. Before the second phase begins, the system gives them a 10-minute break. One of the players admires the protagonist's skill, noting that it's impressive for someone who beat the final Mirror Arena boss. The others join in with fake praise, offering to let him stay with them if he shares his secret to getting strong. This is where Chicken's trap begins. The clan leader agrees to let him join but asks for his phone number and address so they can contact him easily. He also has to sign a contract stating that any gear or items he finds must go to the clan first, though they promise compensation. Plus, he must go on missions whenever the group asks. Just when it seemed like the protagonist was actually considering the contract, his response, before revealing his own terms, was that they'd have to kill his sister in front of him, and then kill him too before he'd ever agree. Ignoring Chicken, he continues the conversation by casually confessing that he has already died once and knows what the future holds. He then makes them an offer, work for him in exchange for his secret, and he'll let them rule the real world by his side, even helping them take down the real lightning strike. His words wound their pride, and they all look at him like they want to kill him. To prove he can handle them and more, the protagonist challenges them all to a friendly duel. Of course, the only one who thinks this is friendly is the protagonist, as one of the players is already stepping up to shut him up. But neither he nor anyone else was prepared to see him kill the attacker with a single blow. By taking him out, he gained a random loot drop, which allows him to take a random piece of gear or item from the dead player. The other players don't care what the protagonist has to say, so they all attack Yi at once. Yi finishes off 3 more players, mentioning that he doesn't really want to kill them, as it ruins their chances of survival in the future. Interestingly, after taking down the 3 high-level rivals, his body betrays him again as he feels a slight tremor. But that doesn't stop him from shooting a threatening glare at the 5 remaining rivals who are watching the scene in shock. Chicken tries to threaten him, saying that if he keeps losing members, he won't be able to clear the dungeon. In response, the protagonist reminds him that he can just go to the mirror arena and make up his progress in a single day. They, on the other hand, will lose their gear and aren't strong enough to do what he does. Chicken then threatens to order other members to block his access to the arena. In response, the rest of the members end up getting shot right before the terrified eyes of Chicken. He isn't even scared of the protagonist, but of his superiors, because losing his level, rank, and gear means he'll be punished with this. Left with no choice, he gets on his knees and begs. G frowns at this, and Chicken, in exchange for his life, offers to tell him a secret about Yuan World. The protagonist lets him speak, but Chicken wants a guarantee that he won't be killed. Since he doesn't talk fast enough, he just gets shot by the protagonist, who isn't interested in whatever secret he might have anyway. To the protagonist's surprise, the shot doesn't kill him, but the most important thing now is to get ready, as the 10-minute break is almost over. Chicken accuses the protagonist of knowing a secret about Yuan World that explains why he's so strong. He warns that he'll report him to his superiors. As a last resort, he threatens him with hundreds of higher-level players who will hunt him down unless he's spared. Besides the secret, he offers rare restoration potions and help clearing the dungeon. Arrogantly, he asks Chicken what makes him think he can't clear the dungeon alone. Chicken points out the obvious. His level is below 30, and he's wearing starter gear. Then G reveals that his stats are actually equivalent to a level 56 player. He also reminds him that he has new gear now, and as he pulls out his new equipment, he's now 3 times stronger than before, and thanks the useless players who didn't understand how to use good gear for giving him such a gift. Chicken continues denying that he can handle the beasts alone. Right at that moment they arrive, and the protagonist, before they can attack the crystal, mutilates the first animal that dared to attack. Then, one by one, using his katana and without needing knowledge force, he exterminated an entire row of beasts in a second. Afterward, he restored his HP, leaving Chicken speechless. Wondering how it's possible for him to have restoration potions, Chicken swears to make it out of the dungeon alive and says he'll brag once he sees the protagonist die. The protagonist just laughs and warns him that he won't save him even if he begs. Time passes, and Chicken can't believe how many times Yi has healed himself, not knowing he has a healing kit instead of a potion. Speaking of potions, Chicken has run out of them in his inventory. Helpless, he can only curse Yi until his HP is fully consumed by the beast's attacks. Upon his death, a hidden reward appears, giving the protagonist a 10x bonus. Additionally, he receives a random gold drop, which gives him 3 random items from the dead player's inventory. While waiting 10 minutes to return to combat, he checks his knowledge force and is worried to see he only has 5 points left. Since the 10-minute break will only restore half, he worries he won't be able to handle the 3rd wave of beasts. He regrets finishing off the players so soon, and now he can only hope for something good from Chicken's loot. Upon opening it, he gets gear that boosts all his attributes and a primary weapon. However, the fact that it can only fire 1 bullet per minute makes him hesitate. With the new gear, 3 of his attributes now exceed 100 points. For some reason, before continuing, he gives a mock bow of thanks for his new equipment. The protagonist claims that once the mission is over, he'll catch up to the top players. Meanwhile, Chicken, at the resurrection point, was saved from the leader's punishment because of the information Yi gave. With his leader's forgiveness, who decided to deal with the protagonist himself along with a few other players, Chicken plans to get revenge at the cafeteria on Yi's sister and her best friend. Somehow, everything aligns so that Junjun can get her own character in the Yuan world, since her best friend's family invested a large sum of money, because she's forced to play. She isn't having fun, and as they keep talking, she asks June to play with her. June sees this as an opportunity for her best friend and her brother to meet. Her brother, on the other hand, continues to take down creatures, excited about getting so strong so quickly, thanks to the gear. The katana feels much lighter now, his grip has improved, he feels stronger, and his swings are faster. Thanks to the boots, his feet are much faster, and his jumping ability has improved to the point where he can crush something just by landing on it. His eyes can now see sights he's never seen before, but his greed makes him want more, aiming to reach places no one else has. After facing the army of animals, the final moment has arrived. Before him stands the spider boss, which he annihilates in seconds, gaining 360,600 experience points, multiplied by 10 thanks to the previous reward. The protagonist earns the title of Ultimate Returning Fighter, and now, whenever a party member dies, all his attributes increase by 10%. With the points, he reaches level 36 and unlocks 2 level 30 kits. One is Silence, which disables the target's skills for 10 seconds, costing 50 knowledge force points per skill level. Each extra second of the effect requires 10 more points. The Freeze kit, as the name suggests, freezes the target for 10 seconds, costing 50 knowledge force points for every 10 skill levels. With this, he smiles, satisfied with reaching his goal of catching up to the other players. Now, no group will ever reject him again. After winning the fight, he takes a moment outside the game to reflect on his sister's situation, as she doesn't have a player identity. Just then, his sister walks in with gaming gear thanks to Chu's contacts. Chu will be living with them for a while, which the protagonist doesn't mind at all. He's just happy that his sister finally has a login device. Of course, his sister hates his reaction, since he's thinking more about the game than the pretty girl in front of him, and Chu feels awkward watching the scene back to the drama. We go back one day to a random level 40 dungeon, where a group of players is excited about nearly overtaking the New Order clan's second team, which would mean a pay raise. They thank Wei Shi, the girl in the group whose special ability helped them get so far into the dungeon. The leader of Team 3, Zhao Yang, suggests she apply for Team 1 to show off her potential. This obviously takes the whole team by surprise, but the leader thinks it would be selfish to keep her stuck with them. Plus, he's sure she will remember the group once she's successful. Based on that logic, they accept the situation, saying goodbye to her and leaving the door open. What they didn't expect was that the sweet and gentle-looking girl had other plans for the team. She absorbs her teammates' vitality to activate the Hell Condition reward. The leader is furious at the betrayal, but she simply tells him they'll be fine after some more farming. In response, Zhao shoots at her, but she mentions, as she has many times before, that it's useless to use power weapons against players with over 100 agility, as the projectile speed is too slow. Instead, melee weapons are much more reliable for securing a victory. The next day, in a level 45 dungeon with a group of 20, we find the leader of New Order's Team 1, Lightning Strike, finishing a successful fight against a beast alongside the leader of the New Order clan, Blazing Fire. He has been informed about the presence of Yi, another player with Ki. Lightning Strike asks if he should be considered an enemy or an ally, and the clan leader informs him that Yi killed their mirror character administrator. He also asks about Shi's location, who is currently at the hunting grounds. She receives a message asking her to go meet Yi. Since they didn't specify whether to kill or recruit him, she understands the decision is being left to her to test her loyalty to the clan. The logical choice would be to try and recruit him. Therefore, she goes with option number 2, to kill the protagonist, showing no interest in the growth of the clan or its people. Returning to the main plot, we find the protagonist in his room with another dilemma. It turns out that once the Yuan world takes over reality, players can no longer level up. In his past life, the highest level players were level 60. So his goal is to reach that same level to ensure his sister's safety. Using the money earned in the mirror's secret zone, he rented the building across from them and filled it with non-perishable food, since food will be the most valuable resource in a world under the New Order. With one less thing to worry about, he must focus on gaining 24 more levels to reach his power goal. At the rate he's going, he thinks he has enough time. If he keeps this up without getting killed in the game, survival will be easy. Since Lu Yun now has gaming gear, the protagonist begins a training regimen for her and her friend. Despite having good gear and being level 32, she's still quite useless since she hasn't developed Ki. The protagonist lets her know, so he leaves her to practice in the gym until she finds her ideal weapon. Before leaving, he wonders what actions he took to change the course of events and bring Nian Shu to his home and ended up helping him achieve his goals. It turns out that even if she didn't buy the game for her sister, he would still help her, just as she had helped them in her past life. A few hours later, Ye is the talk of the level 35 dungeon. Because of his skill and power, however, it's not enough for our protagonist's goals, since farming the dungeon takes half a day and only gives him half a level. At this rate, he'll only reach level 50 in the 20 days remaining before the end of the world, as he knows it. Analyzing his options in the recruitment lobby, he opens a pop-up window showing a skill he gained in previous battles, which gives him a higher score for every battle companion who dies in combat, labeling players who use such skills as a crisis group. It's no surprise that players using this buff are hated, but it's the only way to gain more power in less time. The protagonist has no choice but to join this hated group just then. He receives a dungeon invitation from Witchy. He's excited because she's one of the best in the game using the Hell skill. Since he isn't stupid, he deduces she's plotting something against him, as they were never close in the past and she belongs to the New Order clan. Analyzing her stats, he remembers that she was one of the first to obtain Ki at the start of the game, which makes him a bit uneasy, but he decides to take the risk anyway. Looking at the player board, he recognizes them because they all use the Hell skill or similar tactics to gain an advantage, leading him to think Wei's gathered them to teach them a lesson, or that they started using dirty strategies like that because of her. When Ye joins the chat, he sees a message from Wei's with the meeting point for all players. The Chaotic Disorder Arena, Dungeon Code 602. Of course, someone insults the protagonist for having a lower tier skill, but Wei steps in to defend him, describing him as a pro player. Ye doesn't really care about the comments though, focusing instead on the map to get some context. Currently, the world of Yuan is divided into 6 main parts: Music City, the Chaotic Order Hunting Grounds, the Chaotic Disorder Hunting Grounds, the Wild Area, and the Madness Area, each with different characteristics described by the protagonist as follows. Music City provides players with supplies and essential items, though the city is completely destroyed by the Mirror Secret Zone and various dungeons. The Chaotic Order Hunting Grounds offer players easy and exciting adventures. The dungeons in the chaotic area cannot be changed, and monsters are sealed inside by Music City. This is the dungeon the protagonist entered with the Chrome Girl. The Chaotic Disorder Hunting Grounds are dangerous and unpredictable because Music City's control weakens there, and monsters are level 300 or lower and can even escape the dungeon. In the Wild Area, almost no player can survive because level 700 monsters that escape the dungeons hide there. Finally, there's the Madness Area, a terrifying zone with incredibly strong destructive monsters where there are no restrictions and monsters roam freely. In the chaotic area, the protagonist stays alert after hearing screams in the distance. Inevitably, this also draws the creature's interest, forcing Ye to hide before becoming the beast's next target. When the sounds of the person the protagonist calls an idiot player stop, he assumes the player has been devoured and continues on his way. But to his surprise, a spear flies straight at him. The owner of the spear is the one who looked down on the protagonist in the chat with Masai, but he's impressed after seeing the protagonist's movements. Even though he claims his Ki level is still higher, Ye realizes the power gap between Masai and this player, making him wonder if he's truly safe continuing with the plan, or if he should just retreat. Despite his doubts, he reaches the meeting point where his teammates and Moshi are waiting. The girl begins to give guidelines for surviving the dungeon and comes up with a plan to clear it. When the group sets out for victory, the protagonist is internally conflicted. He has come so far, and seeing Meishi and the others in front of him, he briefly feels unable to move forward, afraid of losing everything he has gained so far. Regardless, he keeps going, motivating himself to prove that he isn't weaker than them. Upon entering the dungeon, a post-apocalyptic animation triggers. Although it's the first time the other players have seen a dungeon with this theme, it's nothing new for the protagonist. Several of these places have random lore like this. The central focus here is a mannequin with an inscription on its base. Hope and despair exist together, which is apparently the key that will help them clear the dungeon. But before they can do anything, it disappears, and a notification appears stating the dungeon is creating a mission. Find and eliminate the puppet. When the protagonist reads the instructions, he realizes the mission activates the hell condition, as the puppet will hide inside a random player. If that player kills someone, the puppet transfers to another participant. If the player holding the puppet is killed, the puppet is also eliminated. All of this has a 6-hour time limit. If time runs out and the carrier isn't killed, or if there are other players left in the dungeon besides the carrier, the mission fails. As the clock starts ticking, the protagonist stays calm. He doesn't open his inventory, not wanting his expression to give him away in case he has the puppet. For now, he'll just wait for the tension to die down a bit. Everyone starts eyeing each other, analyzing every move until Macy's clapping breaks their concentration. With her typical kindness, she asks the puppet carrier to surrender, promising that the group will chip in to compensate them for their lost gear and levels. She deduces that those without the puppet will obviously agree, exposing the future victim. Taking advantage of everyone focusing on Shi's words, Ye opens his inventory and finds the unfortunate puppet, making him the main target for everyone present. Thanks to Mei's deductions, they now have him in their sights. The group wasn't just waiting to see who had the puppet. Based on their looks and body language, everyone wanted to make sure the protagonist was the one, realizing in that moment that it was all a trap. The shameless girl tells him to just give up, regrow his level later, and join them. The player who accompanied him to the meeting point wants to fight him to see his skills. And the adorable appearance of Macy, who was pretending she didn't want a bloody scene, shifts to her true personality. With no desire to talk, only to act, the protagonist draws his weapons, disappointing the players who know that weapons are useless against their leader. With this, Ye begins his plan. At first glance, all he could sense from Mei Xie was uncertainty. But he never imagined that once she called her brother Faye for help, the jokes would stop being funny, as he was paralyzed by the protagonist's skill, who immediately activates Silence, a skill that freezes all abilities for 5 seconds, and Pendulum, which allows for automatic reloading. With a 1-minute cooldown and an attack 3 times more effective, he finishes off Faye, which helps transfer the puppet to another victim. Everyone in the room is shocked, since Faye was one of the 4 strongest players there. Taking advantage of their distraction and their ignorance of his power, the protagonist set a trap, getting rid of one of the group's biggest threats and leaving them at his mercy. In his mind, he confesses that the trap to immobilize them was originally meant for Maisie, but he deduces she could have dodged it thanks to her high perception. Trying to intimidate the group, he mentions that the puppet has been transferred to another teammate. Maisie, realizing his plan, orders everyone to stay still, but it's too late. Based on the group's body language, the protagonist knows he must go after the girl they've instinctively surrounded. In less than a minute, he kills the rest of the group, leaving only Mei, the puppet carrier, and the protagonist on the battlefield. Of course, Mei attacks Ye, finally understanding his intention to activate the Hell Reward, something she finds quite bold coming from him. Using her melee skills, she wounds Ye several times, confident that sooner or later, he'll run out of potions. She's certain of her victory. She then activates the Broken Steel skill to deliver the final blow. Ye's HP drops significantly, but not enough, because at that very moment, his energy barrier returns to it. It's considered impossible to fill up, even with maximum recovery potions. Cornered, she warns that she'll kill the puppet master to end the game once and for all. Jay feels a strange sensation. Without moving, he simply encourages Mei to make her move, but he never imagined the hidden motives of both girls. Before he can stop it, the puppet master kills Mei and takes her own life, leaving the protagonist in a confusing dilemma. The only apparent option is to commit suicide to get out, thinking all his effort will go to waste. But the fact that he's still alive and hasn't lost or won gives him hope of finding another alternative. Analyzing the battlefield, he realizes that the reach of the game is limited to the size of the platform at the top. Looking at the title again, he notices some small text. "I cannot open this door." After reading it, he touches the carving, wondering if it's part of the game, and accidentally presses a hidden door. This triggers a notification asking for 1,000 strength points to open the secret door to Research Institute 602. Naturally, Jeff is frustrated by the high cost, but he analyzes his options. He's currently using the Desperate Counterattack skill, which gives him over 1,500 points, enough to open the door. However, he can't risk running low on knowledge points without knowing what's on the other side. To avoid being defenseless, he spends 700 knowledge points to activate his attribute and gain a bit more strength so he isn't left vulnerable. As the doors open, a blinding light envelops him. He then appears in a suit inside an elevator, where a projection repeats the same dialogue over and over, demanding a choice. Ignoring the loop, he opens his game menu to see 2 options. Focus on mapping those following you, or dilute and map everyone. He's conflicted, wondering if either choice will lead to an immediate game over. According to the mission script, he's facing a catastrophe. The key to winning lies in the 2 options: the right to survive or becoming a tool to stop the disaster. After thinking about which would be better in the real world, he decides option 2 is the most viable, because granting attributes or skills to only a select group doesn't guarantee they'll follow you. So, with 99% faith, he hopes he's made the right choice. After selecting it, he returns to the platform with no changes, back at the start with his power points at roughly 350 and 50. His recovery speed is slower than usual because he's the puppet master. With no other choice, he waits 5 hours for his power to restore to 15. Once he has enough strength points, he opens the door again. But before picking another option, he thinks that entering the Research Institute might not be as simple as just picking one of the 2 choices. Recalling the opening animation, the puppet narrates how it was kicked out of the lab by a third party. Analyzing this, he forms a theory based on his gut feeling, and once again he picks the second option. Then again, and a third time, waiting the necessary half hour each time to reach the required points. With only 27 minutes left to complete the event, there's finally a reaction to his choice. This confirms Jay's theory. The test wasn't about the specific choice, but about consistency, regardless of which one was picked. What mattered was how many times you stood your ground on your decision. Of course, opening a dungeon of this level requires many skills, so currently, only he is capable of clearing the hidden level of the dungeon on his own. Walking through the halls, he finds the corpse from the opening animation. This gives him 1% computing power. He's informed that the puppet has been purified, and as a reward, he triggers a social reward strategy multiplied by 10. He's surprised to see the mission ended with such a high bonus that he's reached level 44, boosting his stats and granting him new skills, like Frozen State. It freezes the target's HP and knowledge points without cost, and every 10 levels, it adds a second to the freeze duration. The other skill is Target Mark, which costs 50 knowledge points and lasts 10 seconds longer for every 10 levels. Celebrating his victory over Maisie and his new power, he checks the results. In the training room, the girl is also enjoying a personal victory. Mei, on the other hand, is clearly frustrated. At the respawn point, she contacts the leader of the New Order clan and asks him to create a mirror cultivator to get her level back, before telling him about the support player he's been looking for. At the New Order base, Wei Shi informs them about the protagonist's existence, his victory, and the skills he acquired. While the group sees it as a chance to grow, for Gu Hui, who has the same skills the protagonist just got, it's a business obstacle because now he's not the only one with that special ability. Meanwhile, at Ji's house, he's focusing entirely on computing power. He doesn't understand what it means or what will happen at 100%, but he feels that it's vital information for his future. Then, his focus briefly shifts to Nian Chu and the pleasant scent she's left in the house since moving in. But he quickly pushes those thoughts aside and focuses back on the game. Back in the Yuan world, the protagonist is at the weapon shop calculating his progress. He's level 42, only 16 levels away from his goal. He estimates that clearing about 32 secret realms over 20 days would be ideal. Including today, there are only 22 days left before the Yuan world descends into reality. Time is limited, especially if he loses any levels. Furthermore, his equipment is a major problem. It's too weak. And to upgrade it or craft new gear, he needs Secret Realm Essence. He currently has 11,021 points, 6,750 of which came from 3 Secret Realm trips. The rest is obtained by decomposing another item he got from Manasuo. His current gear is missing 3 pieces, a vanity, a necklace, and a shield. He also needs to upgrade his current outfit to level 60, which would cost 16,129 essence. To get that, he'd have to clear mysteries over 40 times. While planning his strategy, he receives an invitation from the leader of New Order to join an elite group with a partner who has the same support power as him. The group's goal is to specialize in the out-of-control zone, also known as the Secret Realm. Recalling his past life when the Yang world descended, the New Order clan controlled the entire southern region of China, right where he is now. As you might expect, this clan gathered elite players while looking down on and belittling weaker players. To end the chat with the clan leader, he says he'll think about the offer. When he analyzes the situation, the pro of joining a team is how fast he'd gain experience thanks to the veteran players. However, it takes away the chance of getting a desperation reward. Additionally, going to the out-of-control zone makes it impossible to use a market teleport to go directly to the secret territory, and the jungle there has creatures with levels over 70. Because of that, he prefers to focus on upgrading his gear. Once he finished modifying it and reached level 100, the rewards exceeded his expectations, increasing his target's strength by 30% and improving the weight ratio of his items. Seeing the benefits of raising his combat power and remembering he'd be surrounded by veterans, joining New Order became tempting. After he accepts, the leader mentions that one of the players has support powers just like him, so he'll be given the same deal. Looking at the numbers, he wonders what kind of person the New Order leader is, but he's more interested in the rewards to upgrade his gear. When the leader adds him to the group chat and formally introduces him, he orders everyone to meet in the north of the city, in Monseong. Before leaving, the protagonist turns off his screen and brings an ordinary pistol and a knife. When he arrives, the players are already prepared for the challenge. He introduces himself to the protagonist, but the protagonist's attention is focused on the clan leader, who asks about the skills of both players. Regarding his vigor skill, he starts by showing his boxing glove. His only weakness is that he must be within 1.5 meters of the target to use his skill, which the protagonist finds awkward since he has a weapon with a range of 100 to 200 meters. He continues the demonstration by showing his repair skill. Next is Protaze, a skill that could be used on bosses to weaken, age, and slow down the enemy. His third skill is called Silence, which can restrict the abilities of any target. To finish the demonstration, he mentions a fourth skill that he keeps secret. When it's the protagonist's turn, he shows his knife with a 3-meter range. He mentions his first skill is Healing, the second is called Blessing, and the third is Imprisonment. After giving a demonstration, he explains that one immobilizes, while the other can free any target. And just like he prefers to keep his fourth skill a secret. The leader then gives a motivational speech to the group before they head out. As they walk, the protagonist wonders what mystery is hidden in the out-of-control zone that makes the New Order leader so determined to clear it. And of course, although seems kind to the protagonist, he's actually just looking for a chance to get rid of him and become the only indispensable support in the group. Outside the control zone, the leader explains how the area calculates difficulty based on the number of players, which is why he chose 10 people. He warns them not to get overconfident, as the minimum difficulty for 10 players is level 70. Since there are no rewards for killing monsters, he suggests finding ways to hide instead of fighting. After the warning, they enter the city, and a giant eagle begins to chase them. One of the players mentions that this creature has already killed 5 of the 10 groups that investigated the area. The leader orders Diane to lure it away, using a skill called Sensitivity that reduces the creature's attack power by 10%. Knowing the creature's reputation, he decides to use Mark, which makes the target visible to the creature within a 1,000-meter radius for 10 minutes. This means serious trouble for the protagonist, as all the creatures are now coming after him. The team leader suspects this isn't an accident and looks at with annoyance. Before trying to save him, he orders the group to head to the first safe point, leaving the group and the protagonist speechless. With nothing else to say or do, they follow his orders. After fighting one of the beasts and running as fast as possible, the leader prays for the protagonist's safety. When he reaches the area, he sees a swarm of beasts gathered, and at that moment he witnesses the protagonist emerge from the swarm of creatures using state solidification, a skill that paralyzes the target and locks their HP. Then he uses Blessing to increase all his attributes and cuts down the creatures around him with a single sword stroke. When the boss approaches, he grabs it by the tusk, points his gun at it, and ends its life with multiple shots, leaving his only spectator speechless. The protagonist tells him it's time to leave. Both of them exit the area, leaving behind the few creatures that survived the massacre. At the safe house, He assumes both players are dead. He also pretends not to understand how the protagonist attracted all those creatures, accusing him of being a problematic teammate. When one of the players checks the map, they see the protagonist and the leader outside the safe house. Unlike the rest of the group who are excited for their leader's return, he is only worried that the protagonist might lead the creatures to their hiding spot. But that's the least of his problems, as he realizes both the protagonist and the leader are hard to get rid of. Meanwhile, the other players start congratulating the leader for being able to save the life of one of their teammates. Looking at the protagonist, the leader understands he doesn't want to draw attention, so he simply gives everyone a 10-minute break before continuing. He approaches to find out how he managed to escape the creatures. The protagonist's previously activated blessing finally takes effect, revealing the name of the mark skill and the person who placed it on him. Although he initially pretends not to understand what he's talking about, the protagonist reminds him that blessing allows him to dispel all evil, including skills. Since the mark is a level 40 vigor skill, the only one capable of such power is He. He then points a gun at his teammate and takes the opportunity to make him look bad in front of the others. Although He tries to get the leader on his side, to his surprise, the leader turns against him to defend the protagonist. Without much explanation, the leader uses his Blood Shadow body skill. He transforms into a mass of blood that can age anyone it absorbs, making them lose consciousness and draining their health for 2 minutes. As you can see, he can't use his skills or escape, so his only option was to die. Instead, the protagonist is offered the chance to join the New Order clan, with the leader offering him the highest position in the organization. He even says that He's death was his way of apologizing for the trouble caused. When the official members hear about the special treatment he's receiving, they're shocked by such favoritism. Since Yi knows nothing is free, he asks what the price for such benefits will be. Basically, he must go on any mission requested and in some cases hand over his gear. This is something the protagonist doesn't agree with, so he rejects the deal. The other members think he's crazy since the base salary for special members is 2 million points, and giving up his equipment would only be temporary. However, the leader took it well. Yi knows this is just the start of the offers, as people will keep trying to recruit him as he grows, even when the game merges with reality. As for the game itself, New Order continues to lose players. The mission is getting difficult, but it doesn't stop them from moving forward to explore the secrets of the out-of-control zone. Accompanied by his team with their incredible and unique skills, it only takes them 4 hours to earn 50 mystery points. As they move deeper into the zone, more mysteries attack. By the 4th day, they've already reached the 12th secret realm. With all the experience gained, his vigor skill reaches level 50. By the 6th day, the team finally found the New Order president's objective. It's worth noting that Ji's spot during the journey was taken by an irrelevant player who was eventually replaced by someone with better skills once the objective was found. Then Rulei makes his entrance at combat level 56. He's one of the clan's 5 strongest masters. His strength and skills were actually used to create the 2 mirror bodies the protagonist defeated earlier in the story. Even though the team members admire him, his arrogance makes it hard to keep that respect. When he sees Yi, he continues to prove he's one of the most conceited players in the game. After identifying the protagonist from the team leader's report, he says that according to the notes, Yi is strong enough to reach his fingers. But he corrects this, saying Yi could only reach 1 finger. Everyone present is shocked by Rulei's provocation. If looks could kill, Yi would have already torn the player in front of him to shreds. It wasn't just his expression, he was already thinking about how much he wanted to eliminate him. To break the tension, the clan leader mentions that Rulei is just a big talker and isn't as bad as he seems. To stop him from talking, he drags him toward the secret zone. Before entering, the leader confesses to the protagonist that his main goal is to capture the realm's special secret. He assures Yi that if he helps, the clan will owe him a favor. Given how serious that promise is, Yi gets curious and asks how special the reward actually is, but the leader simply stays silent and enters the portal. After the conversation, the protagonist realizes something important. In his past life, he never met the New Order president, but rumors made him sound like a cruel demon who didn't value life. This is the opposite of how he's acted lately. That's why Yi treats everyone as an enemy in this game, and soon in the real world, no one will have friends, especially when interfering with the goals of powerful leaders. Once they finally enter the portal, the mission's story begins to unfold. They talk about computing power being applied to an experiment that seemingly had good results, even opening the possibility of using it on mythological creatures. The scene slowly turns grim. The creature they tried to brainwash went insane, and the next thing shown is one of the researchers pressing a button. Once everyone is inside the secret world, the mystery mission activates due to research and development spiraling out of control. The mission is to track N304. This is an ancient research institute used to cultivate a Ming snake. Additionally, each player has a glass bottle they must protect, as it's linked to their HP. If it breaks, the player dies instantly. It sounds easy, and even the team's AI thinks so. Suddenly, a giant snake appears in front of them, and with a single blow, 3 players have died because they dropped their bottles. Thanks to his blessing skill, Yi is able to nullify the snake's illusionary scream. Ru-Lei rushes impulsively toward the snake without analyzing the situation, even though his teammate warns him to be careful. When he attacks with his sword, the snake remains completely unharmed, without a single scratch. Instead, he becomes the snake's snack in a matter of seconds, losing 4 players in less than a minute. As soon as the snake leaves, the broken bottles fuse with the surviving player's bottles, turning a darker color. This suggests that Ru-Lei might still be alive inside the creature, provided his bottle isn't broken. Analyzing the bottles, Yi considers the possibility that this world has the same theme as the puppet mission. If so, the leader might want to clear the dungeon to obtain membrane computing power. As you can imagine, the leader's plans are moving toward eliminating the group to fuse the bottles to create a monster capable of stopping the snake and winning the mission. However, this is just speculation until he has to put it into practice. 20 minutes later, after a long trek, they track Ru-Lei, who is moving at an incredible speed. But it was actually the snake, which nearly devours the leader if not for his crimson skill. He orders Ru-Lei to attack the snake from the inside while the rest of the team splits up to attack from different angles. He soon realizes it's useless, as the snake's scream can break the player's bottles. They can't put the bottles in their inventory, and besides, Ru-Lei tells them the creature is so tough on the inside that any attack is impossible. Once again, the snake retreats, the bottles recharge with the essence of eliminated players. Yi deduces that the snake retreats every time a player is killed. So, when they continue their journey, and he's told the snake will reappear in 20 minutes, it shows up again. The clan president orders one of his players to break their bottle, so the snake will leave them alone. His theory was correct, but the protagonist knows that once he's the only one left, the leader will try to kill him. He assumes this will happen at the research center, where he'll likely be surrounded and attacked by the rest of the team. Not wanting to risk being killed, he asks the leader how he plans to clear the dungeon to test his theory. The leader doesn't explain, but his face says it all. The other survivors don't realize this and start insulting the protagonist for not trusting the team that's been supporting him for a week. But since the protagonist doesn't let sentimentality get in the way, and with only 13 minutes until the snake returns, he wonders whether to attack. If he's wrong, he'll end a friendship with a potential ally. But if he doesn't act now, he'll be at a disadvantage against both the snake and the group. So, he cuts one down in a single move with blood retribution. The protagonist fights through the other player's illusions, quickly wiping out the group. When he tries to find the leader, it's difficult because of the blood skill. Since the leader won't show himself, Yi tries to provoke him by calling him a coward, but it doesn't work. He only appeared when Ru-Lei arrived, who had actually managed to escape the snake's stomach. Now, both rivals are confident that the protagonist has no more tricks up his sleeve, since he revealed all his cards when he defeated the leopard. Regardless, the New Order leader doesn't take any chances and orders Ru-Lei to eliminate him quickly. But since his confidence is even greater than his ego, he wants to have some fun. His confidence isn't just based on his ability to accumulate ki, he also has an ability called Ki Burst, which can neutralize any attack for 30 seconds with a 60-second cooldown. When the leader tries to attack, he's in for a surprise. She has the ability to fuse with someone, sharing their HP, knowledge, strength, skills, equipment, and titles for 10 minutes. Once the restriction on his skills ends, he pulls out his weapon. Ru tries to provoke our protagonist into attacking, feeling confident in his combined skills, but the Jedi warns him not to be so cocky. A second later, he's hit by the protagonist's freezing effects. Neither of them knows how to react. The protagonist has him right where he wants him. Ru is still confident he'll win thanks to his ki block. The only way to beat him is by destroying their bottle, which is behind his back. To shoot it, the protagonist would have to move, giving Ru's skill time to recharge. Besides, he thinks a gun isn't strong enough to hurt him. At least that's what he thought until his abdomen and the bottle were both blown away. Before processing his defeat, his last words are a vow to win their next encounter. However, the protagonist doesn't feel satisfied with the victory, as it's earned him some very influential new enemies. He says he isn't afraid though, since their influence is mostly in the real world, not the game. After picking up his new gear, the snake's presence reminds him that the mission isn't over yet, and it really was just its presence, because as soon as it appeared, it vanished. Jay realizes this happened because of Ru and the leader's deaths, so he rushes to finish the mission in the next 20 minutes before he becomes the snake's next meal. Entering the lab, he notices the place is empty, leaving the snake as the only living thing there. If this mission is like the puppet one, the snake might be the one giving out the reward. Thinking about this, he wonders what the creature wants in exchange for victory. If the goal is to create another snake, maybe it's just for company. On the other hand, it's possible the snake just wants to escape the dungeon. This idea came to him out of nowhere, which surprised him, but it's a real possibility. He decides to wait in the lab to see if the snake can enter. If it does, he'll place the bottle immediately. If not, he'll try the Imperial Soul engraving he bought from the soul shop to convince the snake to come with him. In case you're wondering why he bought such a convenient item, he simply saw it on the artifact list and had a gut feeling it would come in handy. After 10 minutes, he hears the snake, but he stays cautious. Before investigating, he waits another 30 minutes. Standing before the massive snake, he wonders how he'll even communicate with it. Suddenly, the creature asks him through telepathy why he hasn't finished the mission. Since the snake spoke first, Jay feels more confident. Following his plan, he offers the snake a way out of this world. With a single movement, the snake demonstrates its destructive power. It then asks Jay if he knows a way out, making it clear that the snake really does want to be free. Jay then proposes becoming its master, weighing his options: try the artifact with a 17% success rate, or run if it refuses. The snake doesn't seem very interested, and Jay is ready to bolt until a notification pops up. It says the snake wants to become his pet. Once it accepts him as its master, a long list of benefits for the protagonist appears. Furthermore, the mission has changed to focus on liberating the creature. However, he's still nervous because the new goal is to obtain the Imperial Soul, which only has a 1% success rate. With so many variables, he feels the pressure. The Imperial Soul is his only chance to get the creature out of the dungeon by creating a soul link. Suddenly, a new skill called Membrane appears, which can change the rules of any artifact over level 50. With one less problem to worry about, he now has a weapon that can deal triple damage or stun his targets. He also has a pet snake and successfully cleared the dungeon using only 10% of his computing power. He gains enough XP to reach level 57, boosts all his skills, and unlocks a new one by exceeding 5% of his demonic membrane. This skill, Architect, lets him change the rules of the Yuan world for 15 seconds. The duration depends on his membrane percentage, and so another mission ends successfully, just 17 days before the descent. Now that the mission is over, the past few days finally catch up to him. He's exhausted from barely sleeping or eating, but it was worth it, as he's now only 3 levels away from level 60 and has a powerful monster by his side. Once he clears his head, he wonders if the girls managed to get their key this week. Feeling guilty for leaving them unsupervised, he heads over to their room. But before he can knock, he stops in his tracks. He hears his sister saying that Nian Chu has grown, especially in certain areas. It sounds like his sister wants to inspect the goods to check their quality. Since it's hard not to misinterpret what's going on, he decides to just head back to his room and ask them through the game instead. The next morning, Jay has a lot to do, including checking on his sisters. Yesterday he was so tired he fell right asleep, but he sees they're still offline in the game. He then decides to upgrade his gear using the orb, though he's not sure how much realm essence he'll need. As for that essence, his payment still hasn't arrived. Just then, a new message arrives from Lee Orden. He fulfills their agreement and asks to meet with the protagonist, apologizing for how he acted in the dungeon. Jay finds this behavior a bit odd but decides to ignore it for now, since his priority is leveling up. After he finishes talking to the New Order clan leader, he gets a message from his sister. She says she got the strength kit with her axe, while Nian got the same kit with her dual swords. They're both in the mirror zone. So, Jay heads over there. When he enters, he sees the area has changed from New Order's control to Black Yard's. They're a clan that blackmails players with personal info. Anyone who resists the Ghost League's laws gets caught in a trap where they remain in prison even after logging out. Now, his main concern is finding Nian and his sister. Ever since they arrived in the Mirror Zone, they've been famous, not just for their beauty, but for their perfect winning streak. Their presence attracts thousands of players. The protagonist can't believe how popular the pair has become. And as expected, Ayun has been making deals with people who bet on her. A young woman starts chatting with Jay about how beautiful the two girls are, saying how lucky he'd be if a beauty like that ever spoke to him. Jay acts like he doesn't know them while listening to people talk about how the girls are the crush of the entire community. Since Jay doesn't seem as excited as the other guys, the girl tells him to stop acting so cool. Right as she says that, June walks up to the protagonist and gives him a big hug, making everyone look at him with envy, jealousy, and hatred until June calls him brother, and everyone starts saying Yi is their brother-in-law. The moment is pretty funny, but behind the scenes, some sinister characters are lurking. Nian, watching from a distance, once again rejects an agreement between her and the current leader of the Ghost Zone. This doesn't ruin the sibling moment, even though they're thinking different things. June worries her brother might be having dirty thoughts because of how close they are. Meanwhile, the protagonist is struggling not to be suffocated by his sister's strength. When Ghost Lee makes his presence known, surrounded by his entourage, the players know he's planning to punish someone. They just don't know who. Seeing him approach, the protagonist immediately raises his arm to protect her, but June asks him to let her handle this on her own. When the two girls come face to face, Lee doesn't hesitate to intimidate June. The protagonist asks why she's being so aggressive, and Nian explains that she tried to form an alliance with the girl to scam players on the bet. Since they refused, she's looking for revenge and orders her to be imprisoned. But she didn't count on the girl's charm, which made the men want to protect the object of their adoration, especially when she mentions how bad they'd look if they did nothing under the watchful eye of their brother-in-law, which catches the protagonist off guard, and using the same imprisonment tactic, the girl's problem is solved without her lifting a finger. Once the issue is resolved, the girl tells Jay how it was all part of her plan to unite the guys who helped in the Mirror Zone, to join forces and overthrow Ghost Lee's dictatorship. From now on, the Blackyard clan won't be a concern. Seeing how well his sister is doing on her own, he realizes his worries were exaggerated. She exceeded his expectations with her strategy, and the Alliance secures a bright future for her in the game. Since Blackyard wouldn't just sit back, they send a second squad of level 45 players to handle things. When the protagonist steps out, he's met by the army. But since the Mirror Zone is a safe area, even with a 10-level advantage over other players, he decides to let his sister handle the situation. He thinks that if she wins, her fame will grow. Meanwhile, he'll use the remaining 10 days to keep improving his skills. However, he didn't expect the soldiers to attack him for trying to leave the Mirror Zone. Inside, Jun continues motivating the players to fight without fearing retaliation from Blackyard, specifically regarding threats to their personal lives. Ready to face whatever comes through the door, June finishes her speech. One of the players peeks out to see why it's so quiet outside, only to find that the protagonist has wiped out all the soldiers. Unintentionally, he's caused the players to develop a blind loyalty to both him and the girl. In the northern part of the wilderness, the level 55 leader of Blackyard, Swan, is informed about the massacre of his army. The leader in charge is sentenced to a level reset, and his group is suspended for 20 days. The players listening think this is unfair, as it's a light punishment for losing 100 soldiers. Even the leader knows the punishment is light, but his plan requires all the help he can get. When he asks about Yi, informants say he's connected to the New Order clan and spent 7 days inside a dungeon. Considering Yi's possible alliance with New Order, he deduces that Yi has a computing power of over 10%. He finds it strange they'd leave such power in another player's hands. But since New Order is involved, they likely want to take him to the Madness area and kill him there. He plans to use the recent disturbance to blame the New Order leader and break the non-aggression pact between the four lords. Naturally, he's not the only one thinking this way, John. The leader of White Tiger and Jumbi from Green Dragon seem to have the same idea. When the protagonist finally manages to get away from his new fan, he looks satisfied checking the loot from defeating the soldiers. Thanks to the battle, he obtained 100 level 45 drops. Now he wonders how much essence he'll get from dismantling all the gear. Unfortunately, his joy is interrupted by the leader of New Order, who's ready to talk about his own interests in getting the membrane. And just as the Blackyard leader said, the goal was to gain access to the Madness area. Hearing about the Madness area, he remembers hearing of it before the Yuan world descended. This zone was considered dangerous and claimed the lives of hundreds of explorers who tried to scout the area. The leader mentions that the authority to control the Yuan world is located inside. Yi tries to stay calm, asking why the clan leader is sharing such valuable information. But the leader realizes Yi isn't taking his words lightly and suspects he knows more than he's letting on, so he decides not to beat around the bush. The guild leader asks him to join forces to enter the Madness area, where the authority of the Yuan world is supposedly located. To the protagonist, this seems like another plot to get rid of him, but the leader tries to be as transparent as possible in this situation, since his intentions are solely focused on the authority. Sensing the suspicion, he explains that anyone entering must have at least 5% computing power or a membrane. This puts the group at a disadvantage against the protagonist, since everyone inside would be playing on a level playing field. He adds that if he wanted to hurt him, he would have planned a different meeting spot, like inviting him to the wilderness to take the membrane. He gives the protagonist time to consider the offer. In the protagonist's first life, no one ever managed to get the membrane they're talking about, but judging by current conditions, maybe someone did. That would explain how the Yuan world descended into reality. Still, the only thing on the protagonist's mind is getting stronger before that day arrives. Getting back on track, he tries to go to the weapon shop again, hoping no one interrupts him this time. At first, he thought there was another obstacle, but it had nothing to do with him, so he entered without any trouble. Before, he wouldn't have bothered much with reinforcing his gear, but Reincarnation has made him rethink things, including the fact that he has a massive amount of dungeon essence, an amount that seems almost unreal. Continuing his analysis, he calculates how much essence he needs to reinforce his gear. The estimated total to upgrade all his level 60 equipment is 26,200. Since his current amount is less than what's required, he's grateful for the gifts from the Treasure Garden members, which he can use to get his precious points. Opening them, he's a bit disappointed to see rare, customized armor that doesn't have even a single wisdom attribute. On the bright side, he managed to get enough to upgrade the armor, reaching a total of 33,542 dungeon points. Excited, he starts upgrading each piece of gear. The thrill of the moment, seeing how strong he is compared to his past life, moves him. Refocusing, he wonders how to modify the engraving orbs. Using logic, he simply gives the engraving command. Unfortunately, it's not possible to rewrite any other command in the architect. Other orbs apparently have better results, but he has to wait for a cooldown period. Not wanting to waste time, he decides to go form a team to enter a dungeon, but he didn't realize the other players' current levels would be too low. It's low for his current state, which is an obstacle since the dungeon doesn't allow groups with a level difference of more than 10. This makes teaming up with elite players difficult. While thinking of a way to enter the madness area without losing his progress upon death, the reverted orb seems like a godsend. Its purpose is to restore all of the user's attributes after they die. By going to the trial tower, he'll risk his remaining dungeon essence to get the orb. This place has 21 floors, each with its own guardian. The guardians have the same stats as the challenger, but with one attribute enhanced. It's meant to test a player's strength and opens every 8 hours. Among the top players participating are the level 53 White Knight and the Dark Devil, who is the same level. Their presence scared off the other rookies, allowing our protagonist to get a spot without any trouble. Many players get stuck on the 7th floor because of the boss's strength, while the White Knight and Dark Devil made it to the 14th floor. When the witnesses see the new guy, they call him crazy or just a rookie. Previously, the White Knight and Dark Devil were the first ones to obtain the orb. As the trio set off on the mission, the spectators checked the rankings and started placing bets. On the first floor, facing the first boss, the protagonist realizes he just bet all his essence on a place where he doesn't even know the rules, but nothing ventured, nothing gained. So he motivates himself to keep fighting and push his limits. When he attacks, he can't understand why the boss is so weak, especially since it's not even a defense specialist. Meanwhile, the experts have already climbed to the 3rd floor. Their skill and power make the tower much more interesting to watch. Some even think they can gain fame and join the same guild as the Dark Devil, who is feeling very confident. Betting organizations are debating if it was a good idea to bet on Ye. Even though his level is higher than average, the star team is still wary of his guilds and skills. All he can do is keep the faith. Back inside the tower, Yi has reached the 7th floor and doesn't understand why it's being so easy. After analyzing his opponent, he realizes that even though it has his stats, it doesn't have his key combo, making the battle much easier for him. Outside, the crowd can't believe that Yi is keeping up with the White Knight and the Golden Devil. As usual, an arrogant guy tries to ruin the mood, claiming that plenty of players have made it this far. He reminds everyone that the 7th floor Guardian's attributes are double the challenger's, making it only possible to win if you're a core member of a top guild or a high-ranking player. To shut him up, the protagonist caught up with the group just as he finished speaking. On the 8th floor, the Guardian is an agility specialist, and once again, it lacks his special attributes. During this fight, the boss manages to wound him, but it's still defeated in just a few seconds. Yi understands that his opponent's skills will only get more complicated as he progresses. Even so, his confidence leads him to try using the blessing in the next fight. In the blink of an eye, all three were on the 14th floor, moving at the same pace. Surprised by the progress, the solo player shows off his Sky Tower Guild badge, boasting that he won't be solo anymore but will instead be on par with the top players to gain benefits and skills. From the Dark Devil's perspective, we see how his obsession with the tower grew. It's one of the few places where you don't lose your life, only the essence points you bet. His obsession led him to obtain the key burst during the tower's training, until he found himself once again facing the level that had defeated him 7 times in a row. And that's how he finally managed to reach level 15. Outside, a guild rookie takes pride in the achievement as if it were his own. But some of the players aren't that surprised, since Yi also climbed up without any trouble. Meanwhile, the White Knight got stuck on the 14th floor. Since the loyalty of the Sky Tower member is non-existent, he considers betting on Ye. But even he knows that that would be too shameless. Since our protagonist, Ye, has figured out the tower's trick, the challenge isn't much of a threat. The good news is that if he keeps this up, he'll earn a lot of dungeon essence. Meanwhile, the Dark Devil is happy to be the first person to reach the 15th floor. Upon being face-to-face with the boss, he sees it has 3 exclusive skills. Plus, he only has 5 minutes to finish it off. Despite staying optimistic, he lost in a matter of seconds. At the same time, the Dark Knight managed to move on to the next level. Since his shamelessness knows no bounds, when the Red Devil was disqualified and the White Knight took the lead, the supposed Sky Tower member claimed he misspoke and that his membership is actually with the Sanctuary Guild, which is obviously the Knight's Guild. As for Yi, his battle on the 15th floor is dragging on. With rank 3 armor and a special HP swapping skill, the fight has become much harder. Facing an enemy with such an ability, his only advantage is knowing about the skill and that it can be broken under certain conditions, but he doesn't know what they are. With only 2.5 minutes left in the fight, the boss's HP is too high to finish the battle in under 2 minutes. He has no choice but to use his knowledge points to boost his attributes. As for the White Knight, he seems to be having the same problems his companion did earlier. Regardless, he ventures forward to keep fighting. By this point, the protagonist figured out how to interrupt the boss's skill. He just had to attack it 3 times in a single second. This made him realize he should focus on raising all his attributes to 1,000 points in the future, rather than just wisdom. After defeating the boss, Yi sees he's accumulated 135,864 points, plus an armor point. When he teleports to the 16th floor, his blessing buff is removed. Outside, everyone is still debating and bragging about who's better, solo players or guild members. Since it looks like a tie, they decide the winner will be whoever reaches the end of the tower first. But by then, the White Knight had been defeated, and the Two-Faced Man throws his membership card on the floor, changing his tune to praise solo players and support Yi. What happened in the tower was on the 15th floor, when the knight barely managed to survive. Just as he was considering giving up on the 16th floor, he saw that the opponent was a rank 3 wisdom specialist with a skill focused on knowledge power regeneration. He felt confident it would be an easy win, but to his surprise, the boss enhanced its sharp ki, parried his slash, and ended up using the skill against the knight. Unlike the knight, Yi doesn't underestimate his opponent. The boss has a foresight skill, capable of sensing danger a second in advance and dodging naturally. It's a skill that it's quite useful, and I plan to keep it once I leave the tower. When the fight starts, he attacks with all his speed and strength, thinking the boss might not have high enough stats to match his main attribute. Jay wants to take advantage of his high-level warrior title, which gives him a +2 weight ratio. Since his speed is already higher than the boss's, using Knowledge Force boosts his stats even further, giving him a massive speed advantage and securing another victory. However, Jay's real challenge is the final boss, who will have every attribute skill, so he decides to save his Knowledge Force for now. The next floor's boss has a power explosion skill and can swap HP. In the revival room, he runs into a guy he befriended in the tower. They start chatting like old friends about the last boss they faced. They also talk about their experiences and how they ended up losing. In Diablo's case, he felt overwhelmed, seeing that his boss had superior strength and too many attributes. But for our protagonist, that's a piece of cake. His strategy is to attack without using any skills at first. But as soon as things get tough, he'll use Blessing. When he attacked, the boss managed to disarm him and even broke all his gear. To make matters even more confusing, the rivals swapped their HP. So, Jay quickly used Restriction and Blessing to restore all of his equipment, cancel the skills of the boss, increase his strength, and end the battle in just a few hits. On the 18th floor, he tries not to be so careless and plans to use the Viper Snake if things get complicated. Unfortunately, when he checks his skills, he realizes that the snake refuses to cooperate because he hasn't fulfilled its wish. This is news to Jay, who thought its wish was simply to leave the dungeon. With no time to think about it, the floor boss appears. Its skill is the knowledge of regeneration forces. Jay is confident that only the agility specialist among the last 3 guardians will be difficult. As long as he saves his last restriction for the 21st floor, he feels safe. Back with the veterans, White Knight talks about the boss he faced. It has the same traits as the one Jay is fighting now, and it's the reason Red Diablo is so terrified. He considers this boss much more dangerous than the one on floor 21. Returning to the protagonist's fight, Jay is surprised by the boss's unexpected attack. It used Blessing to strike with an attribute higher than Jay's. Without the snake to help, Jay starts to get completely suppressed. Feeling trapped, he threatens to destroy the snake's pendulum. With only seconds left, the snake agrees to an equivalent exchange and comes out to help, granting him new strength and attributes for a limited time. Jay doesn't waste a second subduing the boss and saying goodbye before finishing it off. White Knight and Dark Diablo finally leave the recovery zone, expecting to be praised for breaking the record. On their way out, they're eager to greet their fans, but reality hits them hard when everyone ignores them, focusing on Jay, who is currently on the 19th floor. When they see this for themselves, they can't believe it. In the streets of Musu City, rumors of a rookie on the 19th floor reach the ears of his sister's fan. Hours have passed, and people still can't believe that someone so ordinary-looking can face so many bosses and reach floor 20. The Two-Faced guy tries to fuel the fire by bragging about an achievement that isn't even his, making himself look pathetic to the other players. When Jay reaches floor 21, the sister's fan can't contain himself and shouts to everyone that the big brother-in-law of the secret mirror zone is winning in the tower. He then shows the sister, and new brothers-in-law appear from nowhere to cheer Jay on. Unaware of the chaos outside, Jay focuses on the boss with all attributes activated. This is the final fight that defines everything. If he wins, he'll get more than just the reversible orb. Activating the snake, he thinks of a way to deal with his opponent and is confident he can win thanks to the White Bear bonus and his blessing. His strategy is to survive long enough to reuse blessing while saving knowledge force for the final blow. He stays alert, making sure not to give the boss any opening. 40 seconds pass, then 20, then 10, until there are only 3 seconds left, where the effect of blessing could finally be used again. Just as he starts to feel victorious, the boss also boosts its attributes, showing Jay that it was also holding back some skills. As the boss rushes in, Jay looks on in frustration. Relying on his weight ratio, he has no choice but to dodge and keep his distance. The opponent pulls out another trick, activating an unavoidable attack. Even though Jay thinks he can tank it with his HP, he ends up disarmed again. Knowing he has to block 4 more attacks, he feels cornered, thinking his only options are just delaying his death. But Jay doesn't want to give up or lose the tower's reward, which would make him the best player in the world of Yuan in a matter of seconds. Just then, the Architect's Orb activates, and a new hope emerges as he thinks about the possibility of changing the rules. While dodging the boss, he tries different commands to see which one could modify the rules and give him the win, but nothing works. Frustrated, Jay asks what exactly can be changed in the tower's rules, to which the system lists the options. He realizes he can modify himself, so he orders the orb to remove the cooldowns on his skills. With this, he has 10 seconds to force the boss to his will, pushing his skills to their absolute limit. With 20,000 points in every attribute, Jay wins. He earns over 300,000 dungeon points, the title of Champion of the Tower of Trails, a 42-point weight attribute, and the title for being the first person to clear the tower, along with 100 extra points in all stats. His attributes, and of course, the Reversion Orb. Once he's finished, the system mentions that Jay won't receive any more rewards from the tower, but that's irrelevant now. The ecstatic crowd then turns their attention to the star player, who is focused on the possibility of heading to the area of madness. He's shocked to see hundreds of players cheering for him, especially since they're calling him Big Brother, which he figures is their way of calling him a brother-in-law. This leaves him feeling even more confused. Shrugging it off, he focuses on the orb and thinks of a way to make use of the architect inside the dungeon, so he doesn't have to rely so much on his new item. He then remembers the promise he made to Wyvern and asks what the creature wants. Wyvern replies that he wants to be set free. As they continue talking, he mentions having a strong connection to the area of madness and asks to be taken there. Jay figures this connection might be due to a clue left behind by Wyvern's creators. He agrees and asks the snake to help him out in that dangerous place in exchange, which Wyvern accepts. He then asks for another favor, offering to help the protagonist awaken a specialized skill in return. Getting straight to work, Jay heads over to the weapon shop, confident that he has enough essence to buy whatever the snake needs. Unfortunately, the item costs 300,000 essence points. Wyvern explains that the item would allow him to use his attributes more freely and even return to his original form. In his current state, he can't use his full power without damaging the protagonist's weapons, potentially even destroying them. With no other choice, Jay buys the ring. Looking at it, he wonders if Wyvern had seen the artifact before. That's why he acted like a spoiled brat, refusing to come out, but he doesn't think a beast like Wyvern would have such a reckless attitude while being aware of the situation. Once the ring finished forming, the snake told him that to fulfill his part of the deal, the protagonist must reach level 60. 3 hours later, in the chaotic area of disorder, he enters a random dungeon hoping to reach level 60 before arriving at the madness area. Continuing the adventure, Yi uses Architect to remove the party size restriction, and with this advantage, in 3 days, he cleared the necessary amount of the dungeon thanks to the unlimited rewards he obtained. Besides, he upgraded his orbs and equipment. Looking at his level, he realizes that at level 60, he's hit a level cap and can't gain any more experience from the dungeon. He now understands why, in his past life, the top player in World of Yuan was only level 60. So, if he wants to upgrade his gear to level 70, he'll have to wait for the system's instructions. While at the virtual hotel, the snake asks the protagonist which skills he wants. Considering the boss skills he's faced, he makes a choice and picks the barrier skill. The snake tells him that he must accept the next notifications that appear. When Yi feels like he's walking into a trap, he reads the description, which says he'll enter the territory of the Wyvern's heart spirit. Feeling that accepting would put him at the snake's mercy, he risks everything and agrees. Upon entering, the snake attacks him, and that's how he spends 6 days inside Wyvern to obtain the skill. At the same time, he receives a notification from the leader of the New Order clan, stating they've acquired computing potential and asking if he's interested in joining them tomorrow at 800 to go to the madness area. In the real world, the protagonist takes a moment to rest from the long battle against the snake. It's a well-deserved rest after winning and gaining the barrier skill, which combined with his regenerative ability can significantly reduce the power of his future opponents. It's a combo similar to Silence, but both skills last longer. Feeling proud as he envisions himself as one of the world's top players, the next day arrives. His sister greets him with offerings, fixes his clothes, and they head to their parents' grave, each of them silently reflecting on their own wishes. While Yi ensures Ha-Yun's well-being to keep his parents' souls at peace, she is happy about her upcoming plans. Just then, their parents' best friend, Lu Yi, arrives. He's a bachelor whom Ha-Yun easily manages to tease constantly about being single. Although he acts offended, he later mentions a plan requested by their late parents. Their uncle took care of them for several years until they moved out. Today, they thank him for his kindness, to which Lu Yi responds that he's even more grateful to Yi, who always looked out for him when they lived together. Reflecting for a moment, Yi realizes that he never saw his uncle again after the game descended, even though he's the one who introduced him to World of Yuan. So, he asks him how he's doing in the game. The uncle doesn't answer, but instead asks about him and his sister. His sister then starts bragging about how strong and agile her brother is, leaving their uncle somewhat bewildered and thoughtful. After saying goodbye, the uncle ends up apologizing for getting his nephew into a certain situation. On the way home, Ha-Yun checks the news and sees that the famous Su has disappeared, along with Bai Han. This reminds the protagonist that as the descent of World of Yuan approached, corporations began disappearing overnight. Based on his analysis, he tells his sister to gain 5 more levels in the next 7 days to reach level 50. Back home, Yi wonders about the madness area, as everything has gone according to plan so far. But he's only survived because he knew what was coming. Once the game enters the real world, everything will be uncertain. In the end, he decides to accept the New Order clan leader's invitation to find out what's behind the madness area and what awaits him in the future. Taking advantage of the fact that dying in the game doesn't mean dying in real life, and he has the orb that can revive him. Before registering his data in the orb, he summons the snake and wyvern and activates all his skills to save his strongest form. The next day, he meets New Order at the Gate of Musu, under the gaze of several clans who hate Ie due to past conflicts. They plan to confront him in the madness area, specifically Gardner. However, for now, the 4 largest alliances in the game are maintaining a brief truce, because they've chartered a plane to take everyone participating in the madness area, meaning players with 5% or more computing power. Among them is Wei, who is resentful of lightning and blazing fire, a powerful beast for reaching level 60 so quickly after dying. He's clearly a big spender, as that's one of the easiest ways to progress quickly. In private messages, it's clear that Gardner is the one inciting the other clans to take revenge on Yi. This is complicated, considering he's protected by New Order, where 4 of their players have high computing power. Unaware of the trap being set for him, Yi focuses on Dunyong, the leader of the Sanctuary clan. He mentions that everyone who explores the madness area dies, and they discover that the world inside is inverted. They also describe seeing a glowing orb. What started as a conversation to exchange information turned into a power struggle among the members as they began to belittle the New Order clan. Despite having 4 members with 5% computing power, none of them wanted to risk going. So in a roundabout way, they called him a coward. To settle the dispute, Dunyong proposes a small duel to test everyone's strength. Lightning wastes no time and chooses Gardner, but White Glove suggests the rookies start first to make the battle more interesting. As you might guess, he chooses Yi to fight, openly admitting that he's doing it because of past differences with the clan. He adds that if he loses, he'll admit the past events were his own fault for being weak. Yi doesn't resist the challenge, while the leader of the New Order clan tells him that he doesn't have to fight if he doesn't want to. However, the protagonist insists on fighting anyway. The duel was supposed to be a one-on-one, but they cheated, and the entire group attacked unexpectedly, catching the New Order guild off guard. Since the protagonist was an idiot in his past life in Ingesta, he anticipated something like this. From the moment he boarded the ship, he kept strengthening his blessing skill until every attribute reached its limit. Unfortunately, one of his opponents deactivated his skill and even restricted his ability to move. It seemed like he was going to lose until Wei stepped in and saved him. The group then protects him, while the leader of New Order warns that if the Earth Shadows break the rules, he'll kill them. Gardner defends himself by pointing out that technically, he isn't breaking any rules, since Yi doesn't belong to any guild and isn't part of the peace treaty, considering what they just did to be a simple game. Then, Lu breaks the tension and suggests they rest, which the others agree to. The protagonist thanks Wei for saving him. Blazing Fire asks how he's doing, and Lightning warns Yi that he shouldn't die so easily, as it would ruin his reputation as the only one who beat him. When Blazing Fire tells his members to stay alert, since they obviously can't trust any other guild, they eventually arrive at the boundary of madness. Gardner gives the leader of New Order a choice between an alliance or handing over Yi. Blazing Fire doesn't hesitate to ignore him, choosing Yi over the guild, despite their clear differences. So, Gardner leaves them to their fate. It's not like they have a chance on their own, but their pride is more important. New Order begins the expedition, and Yi wonders what he should do if he finds and obtains that authority. The fog begins to thicken. The members can barely see each other. Just as the leader tells them to stay together, a notification appears, activating a dimensional gate using the group's membranes. The floor cracks, pulling one of the adventurers into another dimension. The system informs them that they are outside the Yuan world, and that the world's membrane has been sealed. Then, it welcomes them to a place beyond dimensions. The protagonist recognizes his surroundings as the Honkai district, the land of outsiders. Another window opens, informing him that all his skills are on cooldown and his stats have been reduced by 96.8%. Amidst the frustration, the system asks him to name the piece of land they're on. The protagonist calls it Island Age. At that moment, a small plant appears in the desert land, and the system tells him that this represents his current health points. Yi doesn't understand what's happening to make things even more confusing. Wyvern appears and eats the plant, but what seemed like a tragedy turns out to be a good thing. When a massive beast begins to attack, it strikes every piece of land it sees, including the protagonists. However, because the snake actually fused with the plant, his life is saved. Yi thanks Wyvern for the gesture and apologizes for thinking he had bad intentions. Wyvern then explains that to use his skills, he needs to gather enough computing power, but for now, they can only keep the plant alive. Their current mission is to find computing power, not just for Wyvern, but also to strengthen the island and head toward the ball of light, just like the snake that attacked them. The snake feels it needs to be there to get membrane calculations. Yi will have to destroy several islands to get it, but it won't be easy. While he wonders where the other members of New Order are, he becomes a target for Uncle Mustache. Upon communicating with the rest of the group, he realizes that everyone is on their own, so he prepares to find a way to get membrane points in his current weak state. With Wyvern's help, he begins to navigate through space, trying to use his blessing to increase his long-range attack, aiming for the center of another island in order to destroy its core, noting that he can use his disabled skills thanks to Architect. Even so, the power boost isn't that impressive, but it's enough to destroy the island. Just as the protagonist is about to celebrate, Wyvern warns him that there is a force field preventing him from firing computing power, and it keeps other islands away. So, Yi has no choice but to go and collect the reward himself, which means the blessing will only last 3 seconds under the dimension suppression. The loss isn't too bad as long as he returns to the island to reset his skills. While going for the membrane, he realizes the entrance beyond the dimension was right beneath him. Also, after defeating the beast, he notices it was named Jin Chao, and he wonders if it's the ruler of the area, so he stays alert. To grab the computing power, the system tells him he can use Architect. This shows Yi that he can use this skill anywhere as long as he has computing power. The system then warns him that he has 60 minutes to use the power or transfer it to his territory. After adding power to the island, Yi understands what to do, so he goes to find more membrane to power up the snake and the island. After destroying a few islands and earning the hatred of Jin Chao, a new character appears. He is a catastrophe rank monster, a monster lord of level 90. The more islands the protagonist destroyed, the more notifications appeared, leading him to believe the boss would show up at any moment. So, he decides to go and prepare before it arrives. On the way, Wei informs the group that he can fuse 2 islands for a short time, but once the fusion ends, the suppression effect will become more intense. The protagonist doesn't say anything because he's more interested in the snake, whom he confronts to finally find out what it wants to do there. It turns out Wyvern always wanted to bring Yi here to reach the center of the digitalized membrane control. In other words, the light they're heading toward. Yi finds the whole situation suspicious, considering the snake was supposed to be locked up and know nothing about the outside world. He asks directly if the creature knows the real world. However, the snake doesn't seem to understand the question when he mentions reality. This leads Yi to assume the game blocks that specific word. But he has little time to dwell on it, as the final boss, so to speak, is approaching. Although he doesn't fully trust the snake, he must join forces with it. Suddenly, Jin Chao appears, and the snake transforms. Before attacking, the snake assures the protagonist that since it chose to be part of his territory's membrane storage, it will stay by his side no matter what. The plan this time is to leave Wyvern with Jin Chao until Ye Jie finds the boss's Imperial Sprout to destroy it. He has to be fast, because Wyvern can't withstand the attacks for long, as the enemy is indestructible. This leaves him unsure of what to do. Quickly, the snake's HP begins to drop. No matter how much he attacks, the tree remains immune. Stopping for a moment, he considers the possibility that the tree itself isn't the core he's looking for, but a facade to hide his true target. The whole situation gives him a headache, making him wish he had the dispersal skill. To make matters worse, Uncle Mustache makes his appearance. However, Yi quickly deduces that this player needs his help to use his dispersion skill along with the protagonist's blessing to destroy the tree. Uncle Mustache is surprised by the protagonist's bluntness and especially by his agreement to the plan. He figures Yi might have a trick up his sleeve in case he tries anything suspicious. Still, he accepts, but asks the protagonist to keep his distance. After a brief exchange, Yi uses the blessing and tells Uncle Mustache to hurry, since he only has 30 seconds before the blessing runs out. He seems confident, and even the potential traitor believes him. Believing the protagonist just signed his own death warrant by using the skill, the tree finally disappears, with only a minute left before Wyvern can no longer withstand the attacks. This seems like a relief for Yi until Uncle Mustache launches a surprise attack. However, Mustache didn't count on the fact that what he saw was just an illusion. This turns out to be Yi's trump card, as his power ratio is much higher than his opponent's. When Yi tries to attack, Uncle Mustache activates weapon suspension, making the protagonist's current weapon disappear. Since Uncle Mustache was overconfident, he reveals that the player's weapons will be disabled for 60 seconds, boasting that this leaves ordinary players defenseless. Upon hearing this, Yi fires his special weapon, securing a quick victory and gaining a 16% increase in his membrane, just in time to finish off Jin Chao's membrane. With 1,550 calculation power points gained from his recent victory, he plans to reach level 10 at the snake's request, while also clearing the remaining islands before ascending to the upper floor. Basically, they need to advance 5 levels before heading toward the light, but before starting the journey, the protagonist suggests resting, especially since the snake deserves it. On his island, Uncle Mustache is shocked to find he's still alive and wonders if his leftover calculation power allowed him to revive. He also doesn't understand why 60% of that power was deducted. Although still confused, he contacts his leader Dunyang, who is curious about Yi's abilities. He asks Uncle Mustache to detail the battle to see if they can find a weakness. As for Yi, he continues to upgrade his weapons and the island with the calculation points he earned. At this point, he realizes that to keep increasing his stats, he must move to the next level, as there are certain growth restrictions based on his current level. Thinking about all the requirements and challenges needed to collect points, he wonders if there's a less complicated way. But for now, he must keep facing more beasts and wants to move forward. Now, he is at the level of the Kinjara realm. With 100 hatred points from this king, Yi continues his journey toward a ruined devourer that crosses his path. The creature is a territory devourer with a weak membrane. Wyvern explains that it's like a moving membrane that protects other monsters. Knowing there might be more of these beasts across the island, the difficulty increases. Looking around, he deduces that the barren island is caused by this species, wondering if it's just this area that's deserted, or the entire second floor. Just then, the protagonist notices his island is being pulled toward Kinjara Island. When he tries to ask Wyvern more about this mysterious level, he senses a presence and sees why. White Glove from the Garden Clan has appeared, inviting the protagonist to form an alliance with him to escape the mysterious place. As you might imagine, this has a double motive, as the clan recently agreed via private message that whoever saw Yi should start a livestream to analyze his combat style and discover his abilities to find a weak point. So as soon as he saw the protagonist, he sent a message about him and started a stream. But his plan failed, because as soon as the last person connected, the protagonist activated Freeze and ended the talk by shooting White Glove, gaining 5% of his membrane. As a final word, Yi clarifies that he considers him an enemy, and his only interest in White Glove was ending his life. In a turn of events, as the protagonist prepares to claim his reward, White Glove revives. Yi asks the snake if dying in that dimension allows for revival. In response, the snake mentions that's not all, as dying deducts calculation power depending on one's level. Yi asks Wyvern why he didn't mention this before. The snake replies that it didn't seem important, considering the protagonist hasn't died and has kept his calculation power above 100. After talking, Yi tries to destroy the sprout on White Glove's island to prevent him from reviving again. But the Garden Clan member protects himself and decides to retreat to the Kinjara Legion's territory, as he admits he's currently at a disadvantage against the protagonist. Yi realizes that White Glove used architects to hide his territory. Before heading to the boss's island, he tells the snake that for now, the only plan is to keep exploring. He will eliminate Kinjara and eventually, when the opportunity comes, finish off White Glove, who watches from his camouflaged island with hatred for the protagonist. He also chats with Gardner to get permission to kill him, even if it's just once. Just as he told Gardner, White Glove is very overconfident, believing he can actually do it. Resuming the adventure, the protagonist finds himself deep in Kinjara Legion territory, facing a level 90 catastrophe rank boss that lives alongside other lower-level beasts, which are just as dangerous. Upon entering the territory as part of the game mechanics, the protagonist's skills are suppressed. While he tries to stay alert for the boss's appearance, White Glove launches a surprise attack. His speed catches Yi off guard, leading him to realize that White Glove has much higher agility stats than his own. When he tries to match him using his blessing, he realizes one of White Glove's skills is transferring his rival's abilities to himself. He can also transfer Kinjara's hatred, making Yi the target for the other beasts. Taking advantage of the chaos, White Glove tries to escape, happy with his power boost, but the protagonist paralyzes him using the freeze lock. White Glove quickly reuses the transfer before the protagonist can counterattack. As a result, he ends up getting caught by his own ability. When the duration of both skills ends, Yi definitely wants to get rid of this nuisance. Analyzing the situation, he realizes that if he uses Blessing, it will last 5 seconds, while White Glove's Blessing will end 2 seconds earlier. So, he activates the skill once more. White Glove gets overconfident when Yi activates Pendulum. Just when he thinks he can copy the final blow, the protagonist activates the stacking effect, reducing the target's knowledge strength. This prevents White Glove from activating his skill. Yi is able to kill him again and take the loot. Afterward, the protagonist heads back to his island for protection, noticing that the creatures seem limited to their own territories. Even Kihara shows up, but stays at the edge of the island. As soon as Kihara tries to leave, Yi stops him by activating all his skills to immobilize him. He thinks victory is near since Kihara is within range of his weapon. Unfortunately, things won't be that easy. As soon as the protagonist fires at Kihara, the beast changes the island's rules to escape certain death. This makes the protagonist realize that any person or monster, as long as they are on their own island, can use the architect. In the end, the protagonist will have to form a forced alliance with someone else if he wants to take down Kihara, as he needs someone to merge their island with the beasts to disable the architect function. Moving on with the story, the protagonist plans to use Don Rencor, and hopefully he won't back out, since this is the second time Yi has killed him, and he doesn't seem very happy about it. After calming his nerves, thanks to Gardner, White Glove reports the skill he copied from the group accompanying Kihara. It's a pretty good skill, and Gardner's greed motivates him to push White Glove to obtain the King Kihara attribute. White Glove mentions it's difficult when the beasts join forces and attack in groups, adding that everything would be easier if Gardner were there to team up. Without any shame, Gardner suggests he talk to Yi to form an alliance. White Glove decides to follow Gardner's advice and sends a message to the protagonist. Yi accepts, knowing he needs a partner, but he won't make it easy. He sets conditions for their temporary alliance, such as sending him to the front lines. Even so, White Glove accepts all the requests without much trouble, but only asks for one condition: to kill 200 of King Kihara's beasts. This is clearly to obtain the King Kihara attribute. The protagonist is suspicious of how little he resisted the demands, including connecting the island to the kings, but since his plan gives him the advantage, he doesn't worry too much. However, he won't let White Glove get those 200 beasts. On the other hand, White Glove calculated everything. Anticipating that Yi would be suspicious of his request, he asked for double the beasts so he could still reach his goal of becoming the territory king and getting revenge. After 25 minutes of hunting and 60 beasts, King Kinhara finally appeared and interrupted White Glove's hunt, who then ran to seek protection from James. Thanks to him, his attributes were boosted, allowing him to easily kill the 60 previous beasts. With that skill, he wishes Jake were one of his own, as he feels practically invincible thanks to the protagonist's blessing. He even managed to survive a hit from King Kinhara. Confused by the king's sudden appearance, he warns Jake that they should return to their respective islands. At that moment, the protagonist heals White Glove and encourages him to fight the king right then and there. But White Glove isn't sure about doing something so risky before completing his objective. In his uncertainty, he seeks advice from Gardner. After hearing his perspective, he has no choice but to trust Yi. In case he ends up being killed again, he plans to survive with his few remaining membrane points to find Gardner, team up, and fight Kinhara to claim the title. Kinhara, finding himself cornered, tries to use Architect, but Yi orders White Glove to merge his island immediately. Despite his doubts, White Glove agrees and merges his island to suppress the king's abilities. Even so, he wonders if he truly made the right decision. Once the island is merged, Yi proceeds to immobilize the king. White Glove is shocked to see how the protagonist managed to take him down in just a few shots. With the beast only one shot away from death, White Glove eagerly awaits the king's end to claim his title. But Yi stops attacking, demanding to know why he's so desperate to eliminate the creature, promising to let him go if his answer satisfies him. Since White Glove's desperation was so great, he lunges at the creature to finish it off. Feeling victory so close, he agrees to tell the protagonist, but it was too late. Yi shot him before he could speak. To Yi, the reason didn't matter, as he knew the man was up to something. Right as he shot White Glove, King Kinhara also died. Even so, the island remained afloat, which meant Yi would have to destroy the Imperial sapling to claim the reward. Just then, the snake suggests that before destroying the sapling, he should use Imperial Soul engraving to store one of the lesser Kinharas and get a reward before a new king appears. Yi seems a bit annoyed by the animal's incomplete explanation, but he quickly focuses on the fact that kings can revive on their respective islands. He speeds up to follow the plan exactly before White Glove can cause any more trouble, though he doesn't realize he'll actually be free of him for a while, since his territory's calculation power was below 100. The system didn't just deduct points, it marked him as dead. Even if he's gone from the game, real life is a different story, as Gardner has ordered him to be found in the real world since he's too difficult to deal with in the Yuan world. The most sensible thing is to kidnap him, as he realizes after absorbing the calculation points from White Glove's island that with only 88 points, White Glove cannot revive there. With the path clear, the protagonist decides to go capture a lesser Kinhara. While exploring the territory, the hunt doesn't seem very productive, as the beasts prefer to kill each other rather than be captured. So far, they've all been red and black types, which aren't very useful. The more he explored, the deeper he went into Kinhara territory until he reached the Imperial sapling. The logical thing would be to destroy the island for the calculation points, but the protagonist analyzes everything that has happened, considering the possibility that this island might be his only source of power for the remaining levels. He recalls White Glove's insistence on eliminating so many Kinharas and remembers that the black race used the white race to generate calculation power. He wonders if there's a way to create and accumulate that power to reach the third floor. After killing the king, he obtained a white Kinhara and a hatred notification. Since the little one stays by his side and doesn't try to kill him, he decides to capture it. And this is where the real surprise comes in, hitting Yi when he sees the Kinhara's skill notification. If he helps the Kinhara grow and makes him the island's king, he'll earn the King Kinhara title and likely discover a way to gain calculation power. As Yi understands the situation better, he realizes why White Glove was so interested in eliminating the Kinharas. To avoid wasting any more time, he goes on a hunt, making sure his Kinhara lands the final blow on every opponent to strengthen it. In a turn of events, the Kinharas that were previously killing each other now join forces to chase Ye, who runs back to his island seeking protection for himself and his Kinhara. However, he realizes that since his pet is part of the Kinhara island territory, it cannot enter the protagonist's island. To prevent the creature's death, Yi boosts its skills while providing support from his own island. Faced with a flock of birds, his Kinhara must become their king if it wants to survive. With Yi's blessing, the creature's transformation was swift. Seeing the Kinhara's evolution, the protagonist regrets that the warrior cannot leave the island, as it would be very useful to him in the remaining missions. Once again, he heads to the massive tree to acquire calculation power, and notices that it lights up every time a Kinhara is killed. Additionally, since his pet became king, the creatures stopped attacking each other, though they remain hostile toward the protagonist. When the king grants him the calculation power, he sees that it's too little to upgrade his island. Wyvern, or White, the name the protagonist gave his Kinhara, noticed the protagonist's disappointment and by eliminating the Kinharas in the area, generated more calculation power for Yi. This helps Yi put the puzzle together to understand how to obtain calculation power. There are two types of imperial trees on the island for the respective Kinhara races, white and black. By eliminating beasts of its own species, the Kinhara king can produce calculation power. It's a bit ruthless, but effective, as he reached the limit allowed to expand his territory and upgrade Wyvern. Back at the island, to upgrade it, the protagonist asks Wyvern if there's a way to merge the ice island with the Kinhara island. He actually could, but Wyvern warns him that the upgrade requirement could increase up to 100 times, as the creature's island is a fusion of white and black territories. As for White, he can't take him along, but Wyvern suggests leaving him there to keep collecting calculation points. It seems like a good plan. In a few days, the Yuan world will descend, and the protagonist has no idea how to return when that happens, but these are just small details he'll worry about when the time comes. For now, he focuses on the 3rd floor, thinking he'd be the first to arrive, but he's not, as he learns through a message that Wei Shi is already there. The girl, certain that the protagonist had already, is in the area. She asks for his help and sends a photo so he can recognize where she might be. At first, Yi wasn't very willing to save the lost Wei Shi, but then a message from the girl made him change his mind, as she managed to find the key to the digitization center. While it's a mystery to Wei how to use it, Yi understands immediately, and the snake confirms his theory, meaning Yi must face the massive creature before he can help his companion, who tells him to jump toward the weapon devourer, the giant beast in front of our protagonist, to be swallowed up. Meanwhile, in a random location filled with lightning and blazing fire, Yi and Wei learn through their messages that they can revive if they have enough computing points, which makes Lightning feel like a side character. Blazing Fire simply tries to calm Lightning down so he can focus on defeating the level 2 boss and obtaining the key Wei showed in the chat. On the other hand, before Yi enters the Soul Devourer's mouth, he follows Wyvern's orders and hides the island with the snake inside to secure his return. As for the other 2 extras, 2 of them reach the 3rd floor, assuming that Yi is likely already there. Since they know almost all of his abilities, they plan to join forces to take him down. In the middle of their talk, the system interrupts them, warning of the presence of extremely powerful beasts in that area. At that moment, they saw Yi heading into the Soul Devourer. Once inside the creature, the protagonist is taken to the territory of the God of 100 Flowers, and his suppression within the territory is at 40%. Without Wyvern as backup, and with limited use of his skills, he doesn't know how he'll face the catastrophe-rank Monster Lord. He found the key just as he entered the territory. The Monster Lord doesn't hesitate to attack. Unlike other bosses, he has no attack cooldown, and his movement range apparently covers the entire territory. As Ye's HP dropped, he felt more and more desperate until Wei appeared and saved him from certain death once again. Guiding him to the safe zone, she begins to explain what they need to do. Wei says the only feasible way to get the key is to eliminate the Flower Lord. She mentions that whenever she tried to leave the territory, she ended up back where Gambo was, deducing that she can't escape and that this is the only spot where the boss doesn't attack. She also notes it's strange that the Flower Lord is attacking Zatan. The protagonist soon realizes Wei wants to use him as bait for her plan. Although Yi isn't too happy about the comment, he asks about the girl's plan. Wei mentions she needs to stack the boss 3 times to activate her skill, saying she already has 2 stacks, and with the protagonist's help, she could reach the 3rd. The plan seems easy for now, but external factors like a couple of extras about to enter seem like they'll determine how well the plan will work. Putting the plan into motion, Yi goes out to distract the Flower Lord while telling her via private message to move, as his blessing only lasts 30 seconds. Wei Shi tries to take the key by surprise, but the boss turned out to be faster. Plus, Wei didn't account for the gap in abilities between her and the boss, so Yi had to intervene at that moment. As he rushed to save Wei Shi, who had lost control of her body, Yi noticed the key no longer had the same glow as before, so he was able to grab it. Unfortunately, the system notifies him that he cannot take the key by force for now, as his computing power authority is below 25%. With this new information, Yi runs to save Wei, before the blessing's effect disappears. It seems being saved like that sparks feelings in the girl. Yi, however, only thinks about how much computing power he needs to steal the key. Wei Shi has exactly the amount he needs, but before making any moves or deals with the temporarily paralyzed Wei Shi, those who could have been a nuisance turned out to be the next computing power bonus the protagonist needed. When the 2 extras enter the area and see the boss, they immediately think about keeping their distance. Since they found the protagonist's island, he has no choice but to face them within the zone. Based on the info Uncle Mustache gave them, the more world authority they have, the more benefits they get. So, they plan to take that from Yi too, who already had his sights set on taking them down. The only thing that saved him from being killed was his armor skill, starting a life or death struggle, as the opponent's skills and abilities are greater than Yi expected. He even has a recovery skill similar to Yi's, which leaves him bewildered but not defeated, as Yi interrupts the recovery skill while continuing his attacks, leaving the Sanctuary Group's Iron Wall defenseless within minutes. In case you were wondering, the extra support is still alive and he makes his appearance, interrupting just in time to heal his companion and finish the protagonist's skill. Once the attributes are restored, June tries to attack the meddler, but Mariah interrupts and this time disables the protagonist's armor. He doesn't understand how his rival has such a skill. He thinks that attribute was granted by Yu's blessing and that it might work differently than his own. With no time to lose, Mariah hits the protagonist over and over with all his strength, but both are surprised that no death notification appears. In Gesso, a notification warns them that the protagonist's HP is too high to use his exchange skill. Without understanding how he maximized his power, he's bewildered to see Jess emerging from the rubble. And behind him, the Lord of the 100 Flowers is swapping HP with her, thanks to Lalo, making him completely immune to any tricks the pair tries. They are shocked by the presence of the boss they had carefully tried to avoid. By this point, Jun's knowledge power has run out, leaving Mariah to his fate, but in just a few seconds, he ended up being part of the protagonist's membrane collection. Feeling the danger, Jun tries to escape, which he only manages because Ye lets him, since his goal turned out to be the key. Upon holding it, the system asks if he wants to steal the key and keep the Lord of the 100 Flowers as his companion. And of course, he said yes to both. Poor, delusional Lestra was surprised when he realized he wasn't being chased and deduced that Ye was fighting the Lord of the 100 Flowers, seeing a new chance to attack the protagonist. So he decides to head back. Ye plans to keep the key to ask Wyvern how the system works. With another goal completed, he plans to use the Lord of the 100 Flowers to get more computing potential. Just as he's regretting losing sight of Jun, he comes running back, and seeing that the situation isn't what he expected, he gets scared. Obviously, Ye doesn't miss the opportunity. After finishing things up, he contacts Wyvern to see if she has regained mobility in her body. Gwen informs him that she still needs 100 minutes to recover, so Jess heads to the private territory to obtain computing power, and ends up disappointed to see that there's none of that there. And with that discovery, he fears the next islands will be the same. Trying to shake the thought, he wonders if there's a direct way to reach the giant ball of light. Entering a room by chance, he finds a teleportation machine. The bad news is that he needs 2,000 or more computing power points to use it. With that said, he thinks about returning to his island. On the way back with 100 flowers and Wei, the protagonist debates what to do and asks Wei Shi how much architect power she has. She replies that, by using the architect to move through the island, she ended up with nothing. This surprises the protagonist, who thinks that if Wei's words are true, perhaps Wyvern's help allowed him to use the architect on the island without wasting power points. Considering Wei's apparent honesty, he invites her to team up with him. Then, Yi asks her to stay inside the dimension while he returns to his island. We see the side characters thinking they have a chance against Yi. Despite the monster factor being against them, the pair has planned their next move, showing off the regeneration orb they have, and they contact Jinjin for reinforcements. While on the island, neither Yi nor Wyvern understand how he can use the architect so freely, but the protagonist focuses on the teleportation room. However, Wyvern doesn't understand the room's system either, so Yi would be at risk of being sent into a trap. Considering this, he plans to leave the snake on the island once more, with a bit of computing power, while he takes the rest to investigate the room better. This time, Wyvern doesn't plan to stay on the island and suggests the protagonist take him along, as he'd be more helpful outside with enough computing power to use all his skills and the advantage that being near him could reduce the cost of using the architect. However, the downside of taking Wyvern out is that the island will be destroyed and he won't be able to revive. It's a risky decision, but since the world descent has become a race against time, strength is a key factor, so he chooses to bring Wyvern along. Merging with the protagonist grants the snake the same advantages as being on the island, so as mentioned, he has fewer limitations than before, recovering 44% of his skills and gaining the ability to float. Just as Yi was returning to the dimension, Wei Shi was discussing things with a mythical dragon who seems to have helped her throughout the journey. The mythical creature tells her to eliminate all competitors so she doesn't end up like him. As for Yi, he suggests she use him to her advantage. And that's where Wei's trust in the creature ended, because she basically fell in love, or maybe became obsessed. After she finished talking to the dragon, the protagonist arrives, with the side characters right behind him. To avoid wasting time and fearing they might use their trump card, he leaves the fight to the Lord of the 100 Flowers. However, the hidden card took 100 Flowers' life. This skill is called Spark Key, a skill that deals no damage when activated, but its side effect is 1 second of weakness for each successive use. Recognizing the skill, Wyvern tries to protect Yi, knowing the bright light is responsible for the chaos. Once she appears, the protagonist doesn't hesitate to immobilize her to try and finish her off. Wei Shi warns him not to attack her directly, but the warning comes too late. The bright light activates a passive skill that allows her to dodge his active attack. The light then prepares to activate Spark Key. Wyvern looks on in frustration, trying to think of a way to save Ye, whose restriction time has run out. As for the pair, one of them brags about how it took them 2 days to grind and stack the bright light skills before entering the madness area, and how they used the reversal orb to record her state, regretting not having a finishing blow in this situation. Their joy and confidence didn't last long once they went to see how the fight was going, and since he is now linked with Wyvern, his resistance was enough to withstand and counterattack the bright light until she vanished, being the next ones to be attacked, increasing the protagonist's membrane by 36%. Someone wanted to show off their skill and strength firsthand. The dragon, along with Weiss, keeps urging her to finish off Yi, as devouring the creature inside him would give her enough energy to evolve. He motivates her by reminding her that the mysteries of the Yuan world are beyond her imagination, so she must fight for every possible benefit. Then Mei asks the protagonist why he lets her stay by his side, suggesting that he might be too overconfident or that he's looking down on her. In response, Yi reminds her that they are heading to a completely unknown place where the threats could be much greater than the previous levels. So, it would be a waste of time to fight when there's so much danger around. He asks Mei once again to form an alliance until the end of the final level. Mei accepts, though the dragon still insists that she take any opportunity to kill Yi and absorb Wyvern. Upon reaching the control center, Wyvern tells the protagonist that if the teleportation fails, he'll help buy some time. After activating the machine, Yi warns her that he doesn't know what might happen, so now more than ever, they must trust each other. When the teleportation ends, Yi looks around and realizes he's on level 4 or 5. Seeing this wasteland full of bare rock confuses the protagonist, since level 4 should be a place filled with creatures more dangerous than the previous floors. He tries to get answers from Wyvern, but he's just as confused as he doesn't remember this level being like this. The dragon's desperation for more power grows stronger, and he ends up taking control of Weiss's body. Before losing control, she sends a message to the protagonist, warning him about the situation. Suddenly, the protagonist is completely pinned down, unable to move. Meanwhile, Wyvern shows no intention of coming out. The dragon mocks Yi's naivety and tells him that the Yuan world was destroyed a long time ago. Once again, Yi tries to summon Wyvern. This time he does come out, and immediately asks Yi to activate his architect to set the lineage evolution rate in the area to 100%. Even with the dragon's restriction, he successfully carries out the action, which surprises him. Wyvern continues to move against the dragon, but the creature seems confident, commenting that it seems Wyvern knew about the dragon's presence for a long time, but still couldn't possess his body or devour his consciousness. This is because his rank is higher than the serpent's. He suggests not getting too cocky, even though he possesses a small amount of the Candle Dragon lineage. Wyvern was an evolution of the Candle Dragon that cost many power points to achieve. But even so, he can't absorb his rival as he needs to consume a massive amount of energy to recover, and without that source of energy, he will die. As Yi listens to the giant dragon's explanation, he thinks of a way to help Wyvern. But it wasn't necessary since Weiss ended up sacrificing her life to make the fake dragon disappear. Unfortunately, the trouble continues as the fight damaged the teleportation machine. The protagonist feels trapped in the middle of a barren place with no way to increase his computing power. Then the evolved Wyvern points out that other players will eventually reach this level, and they can take their computing power then. Resigned, the protagonist asks what he should call the serpent now that it has evolved, and that's when it reveals its true name, Hyujin. Then he confronts Hyujin again to find out what else is being hidden. Taking advantage of the fact that there are no restrictions for the moment, the dragon tells him to ask whatever he wants and tries to answer what he can, as he doesn't quite understand what's happening on the 4th floor. Yi asks if pretending to be surprised by the dragon earlier was due to a level condition and not just a distraction. Obviously, that wasn't the case. The protagonist's next question is something he hopes the system won't censor, so he asks what the digitalized membrane is. Hyujin explains that it's an advanced and powerful system that was once at the peak of the Yuan world, capable of turning any living being into a digital form, along with their skills and talents, so they can be easily improved and updated. The explanation leaves the protagonist with more questions than answers, and he asks who created the first Yuan world and for what purpose. But Hyujin doesn't know, and before he can ask anything else, the Emperor's bell lands near Yi. This makes Hyujin hurry to get to the 5th level. Yi reminds him that the teleportation port was damaged, but when he turns around, he finds it in perfect condition. Hyujin mentions that when the bell rings, it has the function of fixing everything that was damaged. It returns everything to its original state while killing every living being in the area. That's why all the monsters that arrived there are gone, and the only reason the protagonist is still alive is because he's treated like an island, as if he were an imperial offspring. Without overthinking it, he activates the platform to go to the floor 5. On level 5, his skill suppression is at 45%, which is lower than on the previous floors. At what seems to be the entrance, Yi finds what is supposed to be the Eastern Emperor's bell. He asks Hyujin if there will be any problems passing near it. To Hyujin, there doesn't seem to be a reason to worry, but they must be quick before the cooldown ends and the bell no longer sees him as part of the territory. Yi suggests trying to get the bell as he considers it a trump card for future battles. Hyujin tells him that to obtain it, he must have the Warrior of Annihilation title, which he doesn't currently possess, so he can't get the bell until his current experience is multiplied by 100, which is likely when he'll earn the title. Disappointed, he heads toward the door, hoping that once the mission is over, he can come back for the bell. However, the surprises continue when Hyujin and Yi are blocked by an invisible barrier. A notification warns them that they cannot proceed until they obtain the Apocalypse rank title. Hyujin wonders who the deceased person was that left the barrier there, debating if it was the one who changed the Yuan world or the owner of the bell. Frustrated, the dragon laments that he can't remember more about his past life. As for Yi, his only concern is finding a way to break the barrier. Hyujin informs him that only someone recognized by the bell's master can pass through, leaving them both at a dead end. Meanwhile, on the 3rd floor, Gardner, with his traitorous mind, is already starting to form his own strategy. He considers abandoning the backyard group to join the sanctuary. Uncle Mustache tries to be his conscience, warning him how bad it would look to the sanctuary leader. However, Gardner believes his strategy is logical, as following the strongest is just part of nature. After destroying the monster, Uncle Mustache seems interested in Gardner's skills, though Gardner remains indifferent. Before answering, he remembers talking to a stranger who has been helping him, thanks to a system loophole that lets him walk freely in the area of madness. In response, Gardner decapitates Uncle Mustache with a single move, realizing that his curiosity was because he wanted to give information about him to Don Khan. With his Apocalypse title, Gardner plans to keep spreading his power to take over everything around him. The side effect of this skill is that a disaster appears every second it's used. The skill notes also mention that its effect can be countered by a disperse type skill. Meanwhile, Yi is still racking his brain to find a way to reach the membrane. He knows he somehow managed it in his past life for all those disasters to have happened. He sees his only chance is waiting for those who could cross the barrier. However, his advantage from taking so many risks would be lost if he has to depend on others now. Once again, he speaks with Eugene, looking for an answer. Eugene suggests a sort of fusion with the barrier, so it assimilates his dragon blood and semi-apocalypse rank, but this requires the connection process to be followed perfectly, or they'll be trapped. Keeping Eugene's words in mind, the protagonist realizes he hasn't seen Rayo, Dinero, or the leader of the New Order clan. Since the only relevant threat in the group is Rayo, the protagonist begins to watch the barrier from a distance, so no one disturbs Eugene's process. Half a day passes, and seeing the barrier turn blue, he realizes it's finally breaking. However, the process is very slow. He starts to lose himself in his desire to be the strongest in an apocalyptic world, but then realizes that he actually wants to save humanity even if no one recognizes him for it. While waiting for Eugene, Yi asks his companion through chat what Gardner's skills are. But before he can get an answer, Gardner himself appears. Yi, seeing the title he carries, realizes that Gardner was the one who managed to descend to the Yuan world. Without hesitation, he subdues Gardner and attacks him immediately. To his surprise, when the smoke clears, Gardner is unharmed. Gardner assumes that since Yi attacked without even trying to form an alliance, he must have found a way to break the barrier and doesn't want to share it. Surprised that Gardner wasn't hurt, Yi tries to push him away from the barrier. He confesses he found a method but warns him that if he touches the barrier and interrupts the process, neither of them will get in. Gardner easily agrees and sits down to wait, which doesn't fully convince Yi. He doubts Gardner's intentions, since with the Apocalypse title, he could basically just enter and take everything. Even so, Gardner remains receptive and even proposes an exchange of information. At the suggestion, Yi decides to play along to buy more time for Eugene. He stalls and asks Gardner to speak first. Gardner explains that the only relevant news in the real world has been about Huan Su, the biggest investor in the Yuan world. According to him, the end of the world will come in 3 years, and the key to stopping it is resolving the crisis at the membrane. This information leaves Yi deep in thought, to the point where he doesn't notice Gardner approaching him. Gardner points this out and then proposes an alliance to save humanity from the end of the world. Yi, being ethical, remains on guard, wondering what he's plotting. At that moment, Rayo and Burning Fire begin their teleportation to the level. When Yi finally speaks, he tells Gardner that he won't accept the deal for now, as he finds it suspicious. Surprisingly, Rayo accepts his reasons, which shocks the protagonist. Rayo just sits down and asks Yi what other things he might know about the UN world. Rayo's calm attitude makes Yi doubt him again, fearing the only reason he's waiting is to gather information. Yi confronts Gardner, mentioning he knows he wants to destroy the authority function to help someone else's plans and his own interests. He warns him not to fully trust the Earth's shadows, suggesting he might be the cause of the apocalypse. When Yi finishes speaking, Gardner deduces from the information given that he belongs to the Heaven faction. This would explain why Yi knows so much and how he got there. Gardner decides to head toward the shield, but Yi stops him, wondering what he said wrong to cause such a sudden reaction. Gardner breaks through Yi's defenses with his Apocalypse rank and finally shatters the barrier. He tells Yi that after he gets the bell, it will be his turn. After a long struggle in the middle of the fight, a strange light begins to absorb the bell. Yi tries to hurry, trusting his bond with Eugene so he won't be betrayed. But the problem is, Gardner. He uses his joke skill, forcing Yi to move toward him and target him. Gardner intends to end Yi's life to claim his reward. Yi uses HP swap for protection, but Gardner has accounted for all of Yi's skills and possesses a passive ability that weakens Yi's healing abilities, while also reducing his HP. Suddenly, Gardner trips and the system indicates that his hidden skill has activated at 50%. Yi decides to go for the bell first, knowing he'll eventually have to face Gardner. So he decides to try and take out Gardner first. He uses his exchange skill to lower Gardner's HP, but for some reason Gardner seems to be lowering his own HP. He stands in front of Yi and waits for his attack. Yi attacks to finish him off, but Gardner survives easily and mocks him. Determined not to lose, Yi engages in hand-to-hand combat with Gardner, which only amuses him more as he sees Yi's desperation. Gardner uses his laceration skill to weaken Yi and taunt him. Even though Yi feels underestimated, he keeps fighting. Disappointed that Yi isn't running away like he expected, Gardner tries to attack but realizes he can't find his weapon, since Yi restricted it. Curiously, Gardner seems indifferent and is actually excited for the chance to kill Yi with his bare hands. Yi debates whether to face him or run toward the bell and enter the control center. Just as he decides to run for the center, lightning and blazing fire arrive. In that moment of distraction, Yi tries to run for the center, but Gardner completely disarms him, confirming Yi's fears that Gardner possesses every specialized skill. Despite being wounded and unarmed, Yi keeps running, both to save his life and to reach the control room. Gardner chases close behind. Finally, Yi manages to enter the control room with his partner's help. Just as Gardner attacks, Yi closes the link door and his partner had given up on him. But Yi's intuition pays off as he closes the link. Gardner's skills are neutralized. Yi finally understands why Gardner didn't attack him from the start. As they are absorbed by the membrane, Gardner swears he'll finish Yi off at the top. However, the cooldown for Yi's pendulum skill is over. Yi tries to shoot Gardner, taking advantage of his limited mobility. Although the attack almost works, it's not enough. Gardner confesses he came close to dying at Yi's hands, but his HP held out. Lightning finally attacks and blazing fire orders him to keep going. Gardner is about to use his key weapon, but Yi manages to restrict it again. Thanking his support team for their help, another attack from Lightning lands and the system notifies them of Gardner's death. Lightning starts bragging about defeating a rival that took Yi half a day to face. However, the celebration is short-lived when Gardner's corpse mutates into a strange energy-absorbing ball and quickly kills Lightning. Although the protagonist tries to attack, he's too weak. Blazing Fire steps in and manages to finish off Gardner for good. After chatting with Lightning, Ellie, the New Order, and Yi begin exploring before Gardner can respawn, remembering that he could return at any moment if he has enough computing power. While exploring the mysterious room, they encounter a red being that absorbs 3 keys in the duo's possession. This opens a secret room where they find the membrane's control center, which leaves them confused since they expected to see the membrane itself. Focusing on the membrane again, they see a dungeon before them. Jay notes that the dungeon requires at least 10 people to enter, and Blazing Fire suggests Jay use his architect's skill to change this rule. Though surprised, Jay agrees, and they enter the dungeon. Before reaching their destination, images of the ocean appear along with 3 bubbles. One appeared in 2 waves, another was discovered by fish, and the last one was rising to the surface. Although he doesn't understand the purpose of these images, they stick in Jay's mind. Looking around, Jay realizes Blazing Fire isn't with him. A window opens, granting him the title of Torchbearer for having the highest membrane calculation. This gives him the authority to digitize the real world and turn it into the Yuan world once he has enough computing power. Meanwhile, Blazing Fire is kicked out of the dungeon due to insufficient computing power. The protagonist is excited, thinking he's completely changed his fate. He believes that if he logs out without activating anything, he can save everyone. While Blazing Fire desperately tries to contact Yi, he logs off happily, believing he's saved humanity from the end of the world. While he celebrates at sea, not far from Yi, a ship mentions that the country's channels have disappeared, and he wonders if the game server simply can't display that part of the map. From his home, Gardner reports the issues to his boss, promising to return as soon as possible. He continues searching for the protagonist in real life to cancel his subscription. The next morning, a frustrated Blazing Fire searches for Yi everywhere. Not understanding why he logged off so suddenly at such a crucial moment, he suspects it might be an attempt by Heaven's Light to sabotage their rescue efforts. With only 1 day left until disaster, the protagonist is enjoying his apparent salvation, training with his sister and his best friend Nian Chu. Although he tries to convince himself a peaceful future with her is possible, a series of events quickly contradicts those ideas. Yi witnesses an inexplicable 2-legged cat at the scene. The cause of its death is later revealed to be Yi himself. Without understanding it, he observes mutated plants that should only exist in the Yuan world. Confused, he's nearly hurt by the plant, but his sister steps in and gets injured instead. Yi manages to pin down the plant and asks Nian Chu for help to break its roots before it hurts any civilians. With the help of people who come to the rescue, they manage to destroy the plant. After taking his sister to the hospital, Yi is confused by what happened, since as the sole holder of the Yuan world keys, he doesn't understand how this could happen. The sight of the mutated plant leads him to believe the worlds have always been connected. This idea links back to what Gardner said about the world being destroyed in 3 years. Worried about his sister, he asks Nian Chu to watch over her while he logs into the game. He finds messages from Blazing Fire in his inbox, and in his reply, demands all the information he has, threatening to do nothing unless he gets the full story. Blazing Fire tries to get Yi's number without success and is surprised by the aggressiveness of his reply. Without beating around the bush, he sends him a series of abnormal news reports from the real world. Seeing Yi's confusion, Blazing Fire explains that those who don't interact with the Earth's shadow will forget any incidents related to the anomalies. This makes Yi suspect he had forgotten what he saw. Continuing the explanation, Blazing Fire tells him that Earth's shadow reported that 10 years ago, 3 mysterious figures appeared in central China. And since then, strange phenomena have been occurring in the real world. Yi asks who Earth's shadow is, but no one knows. This individual only gives helpful instructions, and one of them states that the only hope for saving the world is the authority that Yi chose to use. Feeling the pressure, the doubt, and the memory of his dying sister, Yi decides to activate the authority to face whatever is necessary. Once he makes up his mind, a system notification shows that with 60% computing membrane, he could enable a feature that allows players to increase their levels in the real world. However, he is currently 3% short. When he tries to go find more membranes, the system warns him that he cannot leave. At that moment, Fuego Ardiente contacts him. Yi asks for his computing membrane and shows him the system functions he wants to enable. Surprisingly, Fuego Ardiente offers 33% of his computing membrane to reach the 90% needed to activate more functions. However, according to Fuego Ardiente, the only way to get that membrane is by killing him, and Yi can't leave to do it. Just then, a bell rings, which startles Yi, as he thinks Fuego Ardiente might have been eliminated. However, that doesn't happen, and Yujin appears, barely surviving. Yujin manages to gain the recognition of the East Emperor's bell and evolves to Apocalypse rank. Because of his bond with Yujin, Ye asks if killing Fuego Ardiente would count as his victory so he can get the points he needs. Yujin agrees. As a final message to Fuego Ardiente, he warns him that once he's dead, his level will drop to 1, and once the world is digitized, he'll be vulnerable in real life since his low level will make him a target. Fuego Ardiente asks for a little time to level up, but Yi tells him he doesn't know if the digitalization will activate on its own. Faced with the uncertainty, Fuego Ardiente remains firm and ends up sacrificing himself. The system grants Yi 10% computing membrane for being the sole survivor in the madness area. This, added to the 90%, gives him the chance to open all available windows, and a hidden function of the torch title is activated, where he must collect special experience to level up. Seeing the notification, Yi understands that his level is basically being reset, which would make him level 1. Despite the depression the news causes him, he remembers that his sister and Chu can support him until he finds the mentioned experience. Also, according to the notification, his growth won't be restricted by the Imperial Flower. This makes the protagonist think that the three mysterious beings turn the real world into their own private world. Before he can think about it further, Yujin appears to give him a seed with his source code. It will grow along with the protagonist in the real world, and once it acquires enough power, it will allow Yujin to enter the real world. Yi is surprised, mainly because Yujin recognizes that there are different worlds and that he is part of a game. But the dragon also takes it as something natural, since by evolving, he has recovered part of his memory and blocked off a part of the Yuan world for now. He explains that the place was full of corpses because they were beasts trying to climb to the top, and the accumulated power gave him enough energy to evolve. He also gave Yi information and a vague memory of the Yuan world, which was destroyed once before. Among the minor details, such as not being able to take Yujin to the real world for now, he asked for the Emperor's bell considering the dragon is strong without it. After a moment of silence, Yujin accepts. Additionally, he hands over a sealing orb he got from the Sphere of Light, which allows Yi to seal his current level and attributes. But once sealed, his level drops to level 1, and he can simulate it on any weapon, allowing him to pass that saved grade to any weapon he desires. After thanking Yujin for everything, the digitalization notifies him that there are 5 seconds left for the process. When the counter reaches 0, the system notifies that all players will be disconnected from the service in 3 seconds, and this is where the fusion is successfully completed. As soon as Yi opens his eyes, he tries to summon the last artifacts in his possession to check the fusion. With time against him, he takes Chu and his sister's devices so they can link to the game and get their player data. Upon going out into the street, the beginning of the anarchy is already visible. Yi takes a motorcycle and rushes to the hospital, thinking about the irony of a supreme reward that has practically reset him. At the hospital, there's a terminal cancer patient who also played the Yuan world. However, due to the digitalization, he doesn't realize he has returned to the real world and doesn't understand why his physical condition is so good while being in the hospital. He takes advantage of this situation to vent and take revenge on his family, who couldn't pay for his treatment and chose to let him die. Due to his delusion and belief that everything is part of a game, he considers humans as camouflaged monsters. When Chu hears the commotion, she peeks out the door to see what's happening. Concerned for her friend Yoon's safety, she decides to act quickly. However, the delusional patient breaks the door in half, leaving Chu with few options. To protect herself and Yoon, she pretends to be a support character in the game, hinting that she is there to help the patient clear a dungeon level. Seeing the patient's enthusiastic reaction, Chu realizes that he truly believes he's in a game. Despite the situation, she notices the patient has a sword, which surprises her considering they are in a hospital. With no time to question it, she improvises a story where she was playing with her friend and the latter mysteriously disconnected, leaving her to her own fate. Because of Chu's beauty, the patient is moved and doesn't perceive her as a threat. The patient confesses to Chu that, from what he understands, the only way to exit the game is by killing everyone who isn't a player. Since she has no weapon or protection, Chu is forced to go along with it to ensure her safety. However, she tries to minimize the damage by suggesting it would be more efficient to look for the final boss instead of killing random beasts. At that moment, a beast appears, and the patient, believing he's in a game, tries to protect Chu. Then another creature appears, and Chu tries to attract its attention and direct it toward the patient with the sword. When the fight ends, the crazy guy wasn't actually that crazy, because once he was on the ground with a fatal wound, he stopped convincing himself it was a game and felt guilty for ending his family's suffering. At that moment of vulnerability, Chu, who didn't quite understand what was going through the boy's head, approached him while expressing her gratitude for saving her life. Although the truth behind his words remained hidden from Chu, the simple sincerity in her gesture provided comfort to the young man before he passed away. The boy disappeared and left a reward in his place. With the reward in hand, Chu found herself in front of Yi, who emerged at that moment. The scene of chaos did not go unnoticed by Yi, who quickly asked what had happened there. But Chu didn't go into detail and treated the event as something minor, so as not to scare the protagonist with the news. Without wasting any more time, Yi asks her and his sister to connect to the Yuan world. This is when it becomes clearer to Chu that the patient had such unusual powers. While she was turning to Yi to ask for a coherent explanation of the situation they were trapped in, before Yi could open his mouth to answer, Yoon woke up abruptly. Disoriented, Yoon's sudden awakening immediately drew Chu's attention, diverting it toward her friend and ignoring the protagonist. In this moment, Yi took a second to reflect, immersed in a storm of thoughts. The magnitude of the threat he was facing began to take shape in his mind, leading him to develop a desperate plan to ensure the survival of himself, his sisters, and humanity in general. Amidst the confusion, a new anomaly emerged. A dungeon suddenly appeared. This defied all logic and his past experience, as he had never seen or heard of anything like it in his first life. The portal, appearing out of nowhere, sent the protagonist and the girl in different directions. In that crucial moment, just before being swept away by the crowd into the unknown, Jay shouts to her not to be afraid, since her skills are more than enough to survive anything, and they should treat this like a game. As for him, with no skills, levels, or stats, he decides to use this opportunity to learn more about the special experience he needs. Just as he predicted, the strange portal split the group up. Among the few players left with him, 2 of them turned out to be players where, unlike the protagonist, one of them has a weapon, mentioning that after the forced logout from the world of Yuan, he was given the skills and weapons from his beast. This gave him extreme confidence in his survival and protection in front of all the spectators who didn't understand what was happening. He already believed he was the main character since he was the only one in the group with powers from the game. Meanwhile, his companion didn't understand why he had no powers, despite being a higher level than his friend. Yi played dumb just to stay protected while he looked for a weapon of his own. In Gishu, a level 20 monster appeared. The fake protagonist started showing off his skills. After he finished off the creature, the spectators were thrilled to see their hero's words weren't just empty talk. However, he struggled to keep his composure after feeling the actual physical pain from the beast's attack. Just then, his companion excitedly warned him that more of those beasts were approaching. But by this point, Xiaoxi didn't want to fight anymore, terrified by how much the attack hurt. His friend scolded him, reminding him that everything depended on him. In response, he ended up being abandoned by Xiao. Xiao used his body as a distraction to escape from the beasts. In the confusion, the nurse and the doctor didn't know what to do, but the young man's insistence on taking the opportunity led the nurse to follow him, as he was the only one with even a bit of power to handle the situation. But unlike the nurse, the doctor preferred to fight rather than go with the wolf who had just killed his supposed friend. So, the nurse and Xiao turned their backs on both the doctor and the protagonist, leaving them to their fate. By then, the giant rats had finished running, and the doctor instinctively raised his makeshift weapon. Yi stepped in to take it, hoping that, unlike the kitchen knives at home, this could at least be considered an effective weapon. As soon as he grabbed it, the system congratulated him, classifying it as a normal-grade weapon. This made sense, as it had a better edge than kitchen tools. He then used the sealing orb and finished off both creatures in 2 seconds. That was exactly how long the weapon lasted, because while the orb increased its power, the durability was a different story. After that, the doctor thanked Yi for saving his life. But they weren't safe yet, as more creatures could be heard in the distance. The protagonist asked the surgeon if he happened to have any more Vittoria on him. In response, the doctor pulled out the handful of Vittoria he had, which he had grabbed at the hospital when he saw the creatures. Yi took them, and the system stored them in his inventory. The doctor asked if he could really handle all the approaching monsters, as the protagonist analyzed the situation once more. Assuming the dungeon was scaled to Nian and Yoon's levels, the girls should be at the center. Based on the rules of the Yuan world, Yi knew he'd have to cross 4 areas with monsters ranging from level 20 to 50. So, with the 2 seconds each weapon gave him via the orb, he had to use that time to boost his stats until he reached his sister and friend. After dealing with the monsters and moving forward, Yi and the doctor found the remains of their other companions. Unfortunately, the weapon Xiao couldn't be used by the protagonist, but he kept it anyway. Here he parted ways with the surgeon, telling him he'd be safe, as long as he found a place to hide, since the monsters in the area were gone. He also mentioned that once he found the girls and finished the dungeon, they would be automatically teleported back to the real world. With only 3 points of knowledge strength, Jay continued on his way to rescue the girls, confident that his energy would be enough to save them, though he hoped that as level 50 players, they would be safe, unless they were paralyzed by the fear and pain of their injuries. Soon, his worries vanished when he saw both girls leading an army against the beasts. And not only that, he watched as, in a matter of seconds, they were able to wipe them out and clear the dungeon. This opened the protagonist's eyes as he realized his younger sister could take care of herself and even help him create a better world than in his past life. With the dungeon cleared, the protagonist received a reward suited to his low level, which bumped him to level 2, though without the special experience he expected. Seeing that his sister absorbed most of the experience, with the leftovers turning into calculation power, he deduced that this was the special experience mentioned, meaning he would need 200 times more experience than other players. Back at the hospital, once the group got used to the monsters, they had no trouble exterminating them. Later, they found more players and decided to stick together. Luckily, they all belonged to the non-specialized union guild and were fans of the girl. This was a bit problematic for June, but Yi told her it was a good thing since it meant they trusted her, and the more allies, the better. Just a few meters from the hospital exit, the group already felt like superheroes because of their new abilities. Once outside, they realized the gravity of the situation. Seeing the disaster, everyone headed home to check on their families, including Nian. The two siblings stayed home, but the protagonist soon ordered his sister to stay put while he went to deal with the mutant plants, which would become a major problem for humanity in the future. To help his sister understand, he explained how the disappearance of certain continents was tied to this. He then told his sister to stay home and gather any players willing to follow her to clear any dungeons that appeared. With everything ready the next day, and with Chu lending his private jet, he found a Yuan world player to pilot it and head across the sea to High City. While talking to the ship's captain, Yi realized there were no records of sea monsters in his past life. He also had a feeling that the continent of China and the sea had been severed, leaving the coastal area behind. Unbeknownst to them, a water monster was watching the unknown ship that had set sail. This monster belonged to the Backyard clan, so after reporting its next move, it pursued the ship to eliminate it. Meanwhile, the protagonist's deductions were correct. As they sailed further into the sea, their path was blocked by nothingness. The captain couldn't understand how something like this had been overlooked, but the protagonist didn't seem surprised. His focus remained on increasing his power as quickly as possible. At this point, he felt like he was back at the beginning. Only now he doubted if the hell condition applied in real life, or if the dungeon would help him grow stronger. Just then, a pop-up window explained that killing a player would grant him 10% of their total experience. It also informed him that enemies were approaching, so he could confirm what it was saying. When the Backyard clan arrived, they threw a harpoon at the protagonist, which he couldn't catch due to his level, and that let the squad leader know that Yi was weak, which disappointed him. As a water monster with only 2 brain cells, one of which was used for breathing, he didn't realize he was too far away for his taunts to be heard by the captain and Jay. One of his subordinates tried to explain this, but his response wasn't the best. All the water monster could think was that his boss had sent him to watch someone who looked like a weakling. Ignoring how idiotic he had been, he asked for a megaphone and started mocking the protagonist again. This didn't seem logical to his subordinate, who reminded him that he'd previously said to be careful with the stranger, even if he looked weak. In response, he got hit again for being naive and was reminded that they were 60 meters away, so they couldn't do anything from that distance. The captain of Yi's ship recognized the water monster and asked if he wasn't afraid of the consequences of messing with them, since his group would retaliate. But the leader remained confident that no one would know it was them, so he ordered his allies to draw their weapons, making the captain worry, since those players were over level 40. With a plan in mind, Yi told the captain to keep steering and stay alert for his instructions. The captain didn't seem very confident in following him, because even though Chu had mentioned Yi was a level 60 player, he still had his doubts, but he quickly dispels it to obey Ye. With the orb active, all his attributes are restored for a set period of time. Meanwhile, before attacking, Water Monster tries to knock down Yi and the ship's captain. Before this happens, the protagonist just laughs and starts attacking without realizing that his strength grew as he killed. This scares Water Monster, who now understands why his boss told him to be careful and capture him alive. Once Yi finished off the rest of the crew, he found Water Monster and his subordinate trying to escape. He made him his prisoner and demanded to know who sent him. Both the captain and the henchman thought Water Monster wouldn't give in easily, but it didn't take long for him to reveal that Gardner was responsible for all the chaos. Considering that Patriot Zero is a guild with thousands of players over level 40, Yi estimates that if he eliminates them all, he'll get around 400 million experience points and could easily reach level 55. Since his attributes would be stronger thanks to Yu Jing's core, even if he needs double the experience, he decides to destroy Backyard to save humanity. Taking advantage of the terror they have of him, Ye asks about the mysterious character called Earth Shadow, who has managed to read the protagonist's thoughts, communicate with him, and predict his movements. Despite appearing as an ally, Ye doesn't seem convinced. Putting Earth Shadow aside, the protagonist seems excited about his new abilities, because after finishing off the group, he realized he doesn't just get experience, he also gains key skills every 10 levels, and doesn't have to choose between 2 like before. For now, his concern is finding a weapon that lets him use his ki, though he relies on the 21 victories he has left after picking them up from the hospital. During the trip, they see the ocean is full of corpses. The ship's captain doesn't understand why there are so many casualties, and what's most unsettling to him is that they don't seem to be caused by monsters. The protagonist warns them that things will get worse as light, food, and electricity run out. Plus, government entities mysteriously vanished along with the game's NPCs who used to stop red players. Upon docking at the port city, chaos and devastation are all they see. Yi assumes a dungeon appeared in the area. Monsters came out and caused the disaster, but fortunately, some players managed to clear the dungeon later. Yi tells the captain to stay on the ship. The captain doesn't hesitate to obey him, as a pair from the Backyard Guild orders them to take him to their leader. On the way, Yi considers attacking the low-level members first. Then, Yi targets the leader, who is around level 90 in terms of gear and armor. Meanwhile, to avoid trouble and being executed by either Yi or the boss upon arrival, the pair plans to escape. Now in front of the building that seems to be the guild headquarters, he mentions that the group was backed by the wealthy people of Sand Hill, meaning those who live there. Rumors suggest there were even bribes to get protection from a group of players, including Gu Hao. As they speak, one of the game's investors falls from the top floor. Above the scene involves a resentful player who was rejected by the late investor's daughter, whom he treated like trash and ended up throwing her off as well. This temperamental character is Gu Hao, known as the Red Demon, accompanied by Li Huang, who is preparing to face the protagonist. Seeing him, the two idiots switch sides, certain of Yi's death, but a few seconds and some victories made them switch back to the protagonist's side. Even though the current opponent was simply a clone, apparently having no time to waste, he heads up the building and upon entering through the broken window, he sees the massacre caused by Gu Hao and his allies, wondering where Li Huang is, the one who previously possessed the girl thrown out the window. Amid many intimidating comments, they tell the protagonist that if he kneels like the girl they threw and begs for mercy, they might spare his life. In response, Ye mentions that he no longer feels bad about what he's about to do next. Before the group could understand what he meant or talking about his sister, he became a special experience point, leveling Yi up to 26. Gu Hao doesn't seem intimidated. He even confesses that he's wanted to kill those weak level 40s for a long time to see their attributes. Gu Hao activates his tank key, certain he'll finish off the protagonist, and in response, he activates his key curse, reducing the enemy's attributes by 50% for 10 seconds and hitting him with all his power. Unfortunately, it didn't kill him, it only took away 2/3 of the HP from his enhanced body, so he gave him the chance to escape, or at least that's what Gu Hao thought, before finding himself face-to-face with Yi again, who cornered him at every exit he tried to use. In desperation, Gu Hao rushes to reach the basement to survive. Hearing this, Yi offers his help and sends him to the basement with a single blow. There, he tries to find him again and comes across a dungeon that, unlike the others, doesn't seem to contaminate its surroundings. Yi remembers that this type of dungeon has no capacity limit, and once inside, you can't leave until it's cleared. Considering Gu Hao is level 51, he'll get 20 to 30,000 experience points attempting a mount. So, before going after Gu Hao, he prefers to look for more players to increase his level and avoid any collateral damage upon entering the dungeon. Just then, a message from Shadow tells him to enter